A hush falls over the stadium. The proctor's voice rings out. Minma Uzumaki versus Mito Uzumaki. The crowd freezes. A fight between siblings, the heirs to two legendary clans. The tension is palpable. Everyone is on the edge of their seats, wondering what will happen next. Kushina Uzumaki's eyes dart between her two children, a look of pure shock on her face. Her hands instinctively go to her mouth. She can't believe what she's hearing. Minma and Mito, about to fight each other. Next to her, Minato Namikaze remains stoic. His expression is unreadable, but his fists are clenched tightly at his sides. He has to stay strong, for his children and for his village, but inside, his heart is twisting in knots. Minma and Mito exchange a look. It's a complicated mix, a determined glint in their eyes, a touch of mischief on their lips. They're siblings, and they've sparred countless times. This is just another match, but on a grander stage. With a shared, knowing smile, they turn and walk toward the arena, the weight of the crowd and their parents' worried stares falling away behind them. For them, this is more than a fight. It's a test of skill, a game between two rivals who know each other better than anyone else. Ready to lose, big brother? Mito's voice is a playful jab, but her eyes are serious. She wants this victory, not just to win, but to prove her strength, her capability, her worth. Minma grins, his own confidence radiating. Lose? Am I? Our fight has just begun. His tone carries a touch of arrogance, a challenge. He loves his sister, but this is the moment he's been waiting for, the chance to prove his own worth as the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails. Is that so? Mito's voice is calm, a stark contrast to the brewing storm. You're right, she says, a slight smile on her lips. Then her voice rises to a yell. You are so right. Suddenly, a flurry of adamantium sealing chains erupt from her back, lashing out at Minma. He reacts with surprising speed, dodging the metallic whips as they slice through the air. In a flash, he creates dozens of shadow clones that surround Mito, a silent army ready to strike. Mito's hands move through a series of practice seals. Water style, water waves, she yells. An omnidirectional wall of water erupts from her, a powerful wave that slams into Minma's surrounding shadow clones. The clones dissolve into puffs of smoke, leaving only the original Minma standing. Without missing a beat, Minma weaves his own hand signs. Wind style, great breakthrough. A massive gust of wind blasts from his mouth, aiming to push back the water and overwhelm Mito. The two jutsu collide with a deafening roar. The force of the wind and the power of the water create a vortex of mist and spray, hiding the combatants from view. As the vapor clears, Mito and Minma stand opposite each other, untouched and perfectly still. The stadium is silent, the crowd mesmerized. The siblings are perfectly matched, a stalemate in this opening clash of power. Trying hard, eh? Mito says with a smirk, her voice breaking the silence. Minma's eyes lock with hers. Not as hard as you. In the Jonin stance. A proud smile lights up Kakashi's face. Next to him, Minato beams with an uncontainable sense of pride. They both watch their students, their children, with admiration. See, Mikoto-chan, Kushina says, a playful, smug grin on her face as she nudges her friend. My kids are stronger than yours. Mikoto pouts, her arms crossed over her chest. She can't help but feel a little annoyed, but she knows deep down that Kushina isn't wrong. Wow, Naruto-kun, your siblings have gotten stronger, a surprised Yuki says, her eyes wide as she watches the fight unfold. Back in the arena, Mito forms two shadow clones while Minma does the same. A silent understanding passes between them. They both know it's time to end this. This attack, Mito says, her voice low and serious, would be the final one. Minma finishes, his own eyes narrowing in concentration. Back at arena, they both held out a hand, a spiraling orb of blue chakra forming in each of their palms. Rasengan, with a silent nod, they charged at each other. The two powerful jutsu collided, creating a blinding flash of light and a deafening sound. A cloud of dust and debris billowed up, engulfing the arena. When it finally settled, Mito lay unconscious on the ground. Minma stood over her, his face a perfect poker face, hiding the exhaustion and emotion underneath. The crowd was silent, utterly captivated by the display of power. Mito's eyes fluttered open to a disorienting white. A dim, white ceiling light felt blindingly bright. Groggily, she looked around and saw her brother, Naruto, sitting in a chair behind her. A wave of happiness washed over her at the sight of him, but it was quickly followed by a familiar, heavy guilt. She couldn't help but feel ashamed, thinking of how she had treated him in the past. Naruto reached out and gently took her hand in his. Why? Mito's voice was barely a whisper. Naruto's grip on her hand tightened. Because I still love you. But why? Mito's voice was a mixture of confusion and pain. How could you love me after all the heartbreak? After all the pain? Naruto simply shrugged, his eyes soft. He continued to gently caress her palm, his silence speaking volumes. Tears began to stream down Mito's face. She threw her arms around Naruto, burying her face in his shoulder. I'm so sorry, she sobbed. I'm so sorry. She repeated the apology over and over, her body shaking with the weight of her guilt and grief. Naruto held her tightly, whispering soft, comforting words into her ear. He spoke of forgiveness, of their bond as siblings, of a future where they could start over. His gentle voice was a balm to her shattered heart, and slowly, Mito's sobs began to quiet. Naruto gently helped Mito to her feet. He led her out of the room and into the hallway, where Kushina was waiting for them, her face etched with concern. Did you two sort things out? Kushina asked, her voice filled with apprehension. Mito simply nodded, tears still glistening in her eyes. A wave of relief washed over Kushina, and she let out a long, shuddering sigh. After they returned home, the Namikaze family sat together at the dining table. For the first time in a very long time, they felt like a family, truly close. The final confrontation before the Chunin exams had been tiring, and no one seemed to know where to begin. Before, Mito had been seething with jealousy, but now things had finally been sorted out. Kushina and Minato sat together, their own silent relief palpable. Minma and Mito were engaged in one of their usual playful arguments, their lighthearted bickering filling the room. Meanwhile, Naruto sat by the window, engrossed in a quiet conversation with Yuki. So, I finally learned the Ice Dome mirror and used it against Hinata to win, Yuki said, her voice quiet and shy. She wasn't usually this timid around Naruto, but it was her first time at his house, and being around so many new people was making her anxious. Naruto, sensing her discomfort, gently held her hand, providing silent comfort. Is that right? You're getting stronger day by day, Naruto said, his voice calm and gentle. I'm sorry for missing your fight with Hinata. Don't mention it. It's not a big deal, really, Yuki said, trying to brush the topic aside and appear strong, to hide the hurt and insecurity she felt. She trusted Naruto, but she was also afraid to be alone. She tried to hide her insecurity, but even she knew it was futile because Naruto knew her too well. But I want to make it up to you, in any way you want, Naruto replied, his grip on her hand firm and reassuring. Oh, my baby is being quite the ladies' man, Kushina said, a playful tone in her voice. Yuki's face turned a deep shade of red, and she hid it in her hands. Naruto just rolled his eyes. He knew he was sometimes too attentive to Yuki, but in his mind, she deserved all the love he could offer. After all, she had loved him when no one else did. You did that on purpose, Naruto said, a hint of accusation in his voice as he looked at his mother. Kushina gasped and covered her mouth in mock offense. How could you think I'd do such a thing to such a lovely couple? She said teasingly, finally trying to be a mother to Naruto in a way he needed. She had finally learned that Naruto didn't need someone to coddle him. He needed someone who understood him. Dinner is ready, my lovebirds, Kushina announced, a playful lilt to her voice, as she headed toward the dining room. Naruto waited for her to leave before turning back to Yuki. She was still blushing, her glassy gray eyes looking up at him. Naruto leaned in and gently kissed Yuki, a soft, reassuring pressure on her lips. At the dining table, the atmosphere was a mix of awkwardness and relief. The tension that had hung over the family for years was gone, but an unfamiliar quiet had taken its place. Minato, for all his genius in military strategy and high-pressure decisions, felt completely lost. He was a father who had failed, and despite Naruto's forgiveness, the guilt still clung to him. He hadn't been there for his son when he was a child, and now Naruto was an adult with a girlfriend. The realization still surprised him. He wanted to talk to Naruto, to bridge the distance between them, but he didn't know where to start. "You look lost," Naruto said, his voice gentle, pulling Minato out of his reverie. "I'm just surprised that you have, a girlfriend," Minato replied, a bit of hesitancy in his voice. "You're the one to talk?" Naruto shot back with a slight grin. "You and Mom have been together since the academy." A gasp rippled through Minma and Mito. They stared at their mother, who had suddenly become the center of attention. Kushina blushed, a soft, fond smile on her face as she remembered her first day with Minato. "What? How? When?" Mito asked, a mix of shock and disbelief in her voice. "How does Naruto know?" Minma chimed in, equally stunned. "Ugh. Well, you see, at the academy, she had this red hair, and I really liked her, and ugh." Minato started, his words fumbling. He shot a desperate look at Kushina. "Damn you, Naruto," he thought. "A little help, please," he said aloud, hoping she would come to his rescue. All eyes in the room, including Yuki's, her usual shyness lost in the moment, turned to Kushina. Kushina stammered, then took a long drink of wine. "All right," she began, a rush of fond embarrassment coloring her cheeks. "In the academy, I was kidnapped by Kyumo because of my Jinchuriki status. They wanted the Nine Tails, but Minato saved me. We only started dating after Minato became a Jonin, databang." Her words tumbled out in a frantic, yet fond, rush. "Quite a fairy tale," Naruto said with a smirk, a comment that earned him a playful glare from Kushina. The two girls, Yuki and Mito, were lost in their own thoughts, daydreaming about the story they had just heard. Now, Minato said, a sly smile on his face as he turned to Naruto. "It's only fair if you tell us about your own story." He was getting a bit of playful revenge for the earlier embarrassment. Yuki blushed, clutching Naruto's hand tightly. He gave her a reassuring squeeze and took a moment to walk down memory lane. "I guess it was our sixth mission," Naruto began. Flashback. Currently, Naruto, Yuki, and Kagami were walking down a dirt path. "This is so boring," Kagami complained, her usual tsundere act on full display. Even though she secretly enjoyed her time with Team 12, she would never admit it. Now, Kagami-chan, you were the one who said we should take a C-rank mission, right?" Orochimaru said, his voice silky with an almost grandfatherly smile. "So you don't get to complain about it." Kagami huffed, a faint blush on her cheeks. "Whatever," she muttered, trying to sound angry. Yuki giggled. "Kagami-chan is so cute sometimes," she said, which only made Kagami huff and pout even more angrily. Naruto followed a few steps behind them, a silent chuckle on his lips. The playful bickering and easy banter between his teammates was a stark contrast to the tense, awkward atmosphere that had once been his normal at home. "We arrived," Naruto said, his gaze fixed on the sign that read, "Welcome to the Tea Village." "Yeah, we did," Kagami said with a nonchalant air, though inside, she was excited about seeing a new town. "Sensei, why is it called the Tea Village?" Yuki asked, her curiosity piqued. "Because there is a tea plant, or more like a tea tree, in the middle of the town," Orochimaru explained in a gentle tone. "Huh? But tea plants don't grow that big," Kagami said, her brow furrowed in confusion. "No, they don't," Naruto said. "But this one is special." "Elaborate," Kagami said in a dismissive tone, though she was dying of curiosity on the inside. "It is said that a long time ago, there was a lady who lived here," Naruto began, his voice calm. "She was the most beautiful woman the world had ever seen, with black hair and honey eyes. In short, she was really beautiful." "Okay, I get it," Kagami interrupted, a bit of jealousy in her voice. "She was prettier than your mom. So, what does that have to do with the tree? It's not like she died and became this tea tree, did she?" Naruto sighed. "Let me finish, would you?" "Well, actually, she did," Naruto continued, ignoring Kagami's interruption. "You see, it said that she was a goddess of love who came into this mortal world. One day, she met a man. He ran a tea shop out of hobby, even though he was the lord of a big piece of land. He used his land to grow tea because, in his opinion, tea is the language of love." "How?" Yuki asked, her eyes wide with curiosity. What do you do on a date? Naruto asked, a playful grin on his face. Yuki's cheeks flushed. Go on a tea or coffee, she answered, her voice soft. Exactly, Naruto said, his grin widening. Tea is the language of love. Dumb logic, I know, but it's the folklore, Naruto continued. So the man asked the goddess to visit his tea shop, and when she came, he offered her tea and asked her what love is. The goddess said nothing, but gave him a warm smile. She then took a few seeds, planted them in the soil, and left. The next day, the tea seeds she planted had grown into a huge tree with tea leaves. I don't get it, Kagami said, clearly unsatisfied with the answer. Why didn't she answer? Yuki asked. Because love isn't something you can explain with words, Naruto replied, his voice soft. It's an action. She showed him what love was by giving him a gift, something that would grow and thrive. According to this folklore, Naruto continued, love is something that words can't describe. It's when you understand a person even when their world is completely different from yours. It's when you feel someone even when they are a world apart. It's an act of nurturing and protection. You know an awful lot, Yuki said, her voice soft and gentle. So the tea tree is just a sappy love story? Kagami said, a skeptical look on her face. It is said that when two people who love each other make an offering to the tree, the blessing of the goddess of love follows, clearing the path for them to be truly one, Orochimaru said in a silky voice. Yuki's gaze fixed on the ancient tree, a look of longing in her eyes. Excuse me, she said softly before leaving the group and heading toward a nearby shop. This girl, even on a mission, only thinks about shopping, Kagami sighed, a familiar, exasperated tone in her voice. Naruto handed a scroll to Orochimaru. Complete the mission, he said in a calm, even voice. I'll go check on her. Naruto started searching for Yuki, and after a few moments, he found her near the giant tea tree. She was holding a small bell in her hands. He approached her with a gentle smile. What are you doing, Yuki-chan? He asked politely. Naruto-kun, I wanted to tell you something, Yuki said, her usual shyness gone. In her eyes was pure, glassy trust and vulnerability. I think. No, I know that I love you. So please, make this offering with me. I want to be your reason to return home. Her words were filled with a conviction that surprised even herself. Flashback end. Naruto finished his story, and everyone at the table stared at Yuki. The air was thick with a mix of awe and admiration. Naruto made the right choice. Minato and Kushina said in unison, a genuine warmth in their voices. Mito was lost in her own thoughts, daydreaming about the romantic tale. Minma, meanwhile, just sat there, sulking, a familiar look of jealousy on his face. Yuki hid her blushing face in her hands. Mito walked over to her, a mischievous grin on her face. You're quite bold, Yuki-chan, she teased. You got your fantasy fulfilled, Mito added, her grin widening. Blessed by the goddess of love? Shut up, Yuki yelled, her voice quivering with embarrassment. Ugh, why don't I get any girl? Minma groaned, burying his face in his hands. Because you're a kid, Naruto said matter-of-factly. Hey, we're practically the same age. I'm just a year younger, Minma protested. I meant mental and emotional age, Naruto replied. Are you calling me dumb? Minma asked, his head snapping up. Did no one tell you before? Naruto asked, a slight smirk playing on his lips. I did, Mito chimed in. Minato and Kushina burst into laughter, and even Yuki couldn't hold back a giggle. Minma grumbled something about unfair siblings, but a small smile played on his lips as he looked at his family, who, for the first time, felt like home. After the laughter subsided, a comfortable silence settled over the table. Minato looked at all four of his children. So, there's 1 month before the finals begin. What are you all going to do? Mito and Minma exchanged a look. Minma spoke first. I'll train with Mom. I want to be able to use my Biju chakra. There will be 3 other Jinchuriki besides me who will definitely use theirs. I'll help Minma, Mito added. Minato then turned to Naruto and Yuki. Naruto, he began. Perhaps you can let me train you? I think it'll be all right, Naruto said, a gentle, thoughtful smile on his face. He looked at his father, a new kind of understanding passing between them, a silent acknowledgement of the training and the bond they were about to forge. After dinner, Naruto and Yuki stood, and Naruto began to lead Yuki towards his room. You know, while I do want grandchildren, I think you two are a bit too young for that, Kushina said, a playful smirk on her face. Yuki's face turned a deep shade of red, and a small, embarrassed whimper escaped her lips as she hid her face in her hands. Naruto shot his mother an annoyed glare. Naruto rolled his eyes once more, then gently guided Yuki into his room. They settled into a comfortable embrace on his bed, the quiet hum of the house and the soft moonlight from the window creating a peaceful intimacy. So, what do you think of this place? I mean, it must be better than your apartment, right? Naruto asked. Yuki nodded shyly. I like staying with you, she said, her voice a soft whisper against his chest. Naruto leaned in and gently kissed Yuki, a soft, reassuring pressure on her lips. Naruto pressed his face against her chest and held her tightly. Yuki wrapped her arms around his head, her cheeks resting on his forehead as they drifted off to sleep. The next month passed in a blur of intense training with his father and small, hesitant steps toward opening up with his family. Naruto found himself in a new rhythm, one that balanced the rigor of Minato's tutelage with the slow, sometimes awkward, process of reconnecting with his parents and siblings. Minma, in particular, was struggling. His primary motivation for becoming strong had always been to protect his younger siblings, Mito and Naruto. But in the last month, the truth had hit him hard. Naruto had been alone and had been forced to become strong on his own, a strength that surpassed Minma's. He felt like a complete failure, a protector who had been absent when it mattered most. An even more noticeable change was that Yuki had moved in with Naruto. This made Naruto incredibly happy. She was his, and now he could be with her at all times. For Yuki, the change was overwhelming at first, but she soon found solace in Kushina. The two of them bonded over their similar pasts, having both been ostracized for their unique abilities and backgrounds. Chunin exams. The Chunin exam finals arrived sooner than anyone had. 5 Kage and other great figures from all over the world gathered to witness the massive event. Round 1. The first match of the final round is between Sasuke Uchiha and Naruto Uzumaki. Gamai yelled, his voice echoing through the massive stadium. Sasuke appeared at the top of the stadium and leaped down to the center of the arena, a confident smirk on his face. Meanwhile, a flock of crows with glowing Sharingan eyes gathered in the middle of the field. They swirled and coalesced, and from their midst, Naruto walked out, his expression unreadable. The mere entrance of the two genin was enough to make the massive crowd hold its breath. Sasuke started with his fire style, Great Fireball Jutsu, but Naruto was already gone, reappearing behind him in a flawless body flicker. You missed, Naruto said simply. Sasuke whirled around, a fist crackling with lightning aimed at Naruto's face. The attack connected, but Naruto dispersed into a flock of crows, reforming at a distance. Good, but not good enough, he said, the words fueling Sasuke's rage. Shut up, Sasuke yelled. Stop acting like you're better than me. He charged forward, engaging Naruto in a close-quarters taijutsu fight. Naruto weaved around and dodged every attack with a fluid grace that made it look effortless. Stay still and let me hit you, an enraged Sasuke yelled. And why would I do that? Naruto asked, his voice calm. He grabbed Sasuke's wrist, spun him around, and landed a clean elbow to his chin. In the Kage box. The fourth Raikage, I watched the fight intently. It's not that the Uchiha is bad, he commented. It's just that his opponent is incredibly precise. The Kazekage turned to Minato. You really trained him well, he said. Minato, beaming with pride, replied, he's just very talented. He might be a bigger genius than me. But how does he have the Sharingan? Asked Mei, the fifth Mizukage. I never really knew who my parents were, Minato replied. So it's possible that Kushina's chakra reawakened some dormant Uchiha gene? I'm not really sure, though, because I don't have any Uchiha genes myself. Back in the arena, Sasuke groaned, his body aching. With a quick body flicker, a move he had just copied from Naruto, he vanished and reappeared at the top of the stadium. He charged a Chidori and, with a surprising burst of speed, raced toward Naruto. But Naruto was faster. He grabbed Sasuke's wrist, twisted it, and with his other hand, delivered a sharp uppercut to his chin, knocking him out cold. The winner is Naruto Uzumaki, Gunma shouted, his voice echoing through the stunned silence of the arena. Round 2. A moment later, Gunma's voice boomed through the stadium once more. The second match of the final round, Niji Hyuga versus Minma Uzumaki. There is no point, Niji said, his voice as unyielding as ever. Fate has already dictated me the winner. Tell your fate to piss off, Minma shot back, a determined glint in his eye. Niji activated his Byakugan and charged at Minma, using his gentle fist. Minma weaved and dodged with surprising agility. When Niji finally landed a hit, Minma substituted himself with a log. He then created multiple shadow clones and charged at Niji. Niji started spinning his arm, yelling, 16 palms, 32 palms, 64 palms, as he effortlessly dispatched all of the clones. The remaining clone poofed into a cloud of smoke. You fool, I have the Byakugan. I can see everything, Niji yelled, a smirk on his face. Just then, a fist came from beneath him. A clone erupted from the ground and delivered a solid uppercut, sending Niji flying into the air. Still gonna keep this up? You talk about destiny, but you still haven't landed a solid hit, Minma taunted, his voice clear and confident as he stood over the stunned Niji. Minma created 2 more shadow clones, and together, they formed a Rasengan, charging towards Niji. But Niji had already recovered. He began to spin, yelling, 8 trigrams palm, revolving heaven. A dome of chakra erupted from his body, deflecting the Rasengan and dispelling the clones instantly. In the audience booth, multiple Hyuga clan members started murmuring. The reason was clear. Revolving heaven was supposed to be a main branch technique, but Niji, a member of the side branch, had just used it. Niji moved in, his movements fluid and precise, and landed his first solid hit. 16 palms, 32 palms, 64 palms, he yelled, striking Minma and blocking all of his chakra points. But then, a surge of power erupted from Minma. A single tail of pure Bijou chakra formed behind him, and his speed and strength increased exponentially. Niji was unable to keep up, quickly exhausting himself as he tried to keep pace with the Jinchuriki's newfound power. Niji, refusing to give up, pushed himself to his limits. But it was no use. The revolving heaven technique, which was a massive drain on his chakra, combined with Minma's overwhelming power, quickly led to his exhaustion. He collapsed to the ground, defeated. The winner is Minma Uzumaki, Gunma yelled, his voice a powerful exclamation that cut through the silence of the arena. Round 3. Round 3, Yuki versus Yujito. Gunma yelled, his voice a booming announcement that filled the massive stadium. Yuki and Yujito entered the arena and, with a quick, respectful bow to each other, took their fighting stances. Yuki started by using her water-style, water wave, sending a massive torrent of water across the arena. Then, with a quick series of hand signs, she used her ice release to freeze the entire stadium floor in an instant. Without giving Yujito an opening, Yuki summoned an ice leopard from the frozen ground, forcing Yujito onto the defensive. Yujito leapt and darted around the frozen arena, using her Bijou claws to get a grip on the ice as she expertly dodged the attacks from Yuki's ice leopard. Suddenly, Yujito's power surged. She activated her Bijou mode and took on the form of the two-tailed beast, ready to unleash its power. With a furious roar, Yujito unleashed a torrent of chakra. A blast of heat erupted from her body, instantly melting all of Yuki's ice and turning the entire arena floor back into a normal battlefield, surprising everyone in the stands. In the Kage box, Minato watched the scene unfold with a smile. Your Jinchuriki is quite skilled, he said to I. That she is, I replied, a hint of pride in his voice. Turns out she was pumping Bijou chakra beneath the ice layer to break it. And now, with the infamous blue fire of the two tails, she has a chance against the ice release. Inoki, The third Tsuchikage commented. Huh? But how does Yuki-chan have ice release? Mei asked, turning to Minato. She was originally from the Yuki clan, Minato explained. Her family left her behind during the bloodline purge, and she found her home with us. A hint of sadness flickered in Minato's tone as he spoke of Yuki's past. Mei's eyes showed a brief flicker of empathy, a silent acknowledgement of the pain of being abandoned because of one's power. Back in the arena, Yuki summoned a Chinese-style ice dragon, sending it roaring toward Yujito in a desperate attempt to fight Two-Tailed Beast, and the ice dragon clashed in a spectacular display of might, a fight that was proving to be beyond anything expected from Jinin. Yuki's masterful use of her ice release showed everyone why the style was so feared. Just as Yujito managed to defeat the ice dragon, the ground beneath her began to rumble. A massive, serene Buddha statue rose from the earth, its enormous form towering over the arena. Yuki stood calmly on its shoulder, looking down at Yujito. The sheer scale and unexpectedness of the move was a clear philosophical representation of her superior skill set and a silent declaration of her victory. The entire arena held its breath as the massive, icy hand of the Buddha statue slowly closed, its cold grip encompassing Yujito. I forfeit, Yujito said, her voice strained, after trying and failing to free herself from the icy grasp of the colossal statue. The winner is Yuki of the Leaf, Genmai yelled, his voice echoing through the stunned silence of the arena. Both Yujito and Yuki were taken to the infirmary. Yujito was suffering from the strain of her two-tails form, and Yuki was completely drained from her massive chakra output. You did very well, Naruto said, his voice soft. I have to reach your level. After all, Yuki replied with a small smile. Naruto gave Yuki a gentle kiss, a silent show of his pride, and then helped her back to the participant booth, where they could watch the rest of the matches together. Did I miss anything? Naruto asked Kagami. Temari fought Shikamaru, Kagami replied. And Shikamaru gave up after he trapped Temari with his shadow possession jutsu. Somehow, I'm not surprised, Naruto said with a smirk. And the Sunagakure Jinchuriki is completely crazy, Kagami added, shaking his head. He crushed a Genin with his sand. What about you? Naruto asked. Oh, my match is just about to start. You're right on time, Kagami said, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. How cute. You want us to cheer for you? Naruto teased. Kagami's face flushed with embarrassment. Shut up, Baka. It's not like that or anything. Round 6. Round 6. Kagami versus Chojuro. Genmai yelled, his voice echoing through the stadium. Both Kagami and Chojuro leaped into the arena. Kagami activated her Sharingan, and Chojuro took out his sword, Hiramakiri. Kagami started by throwing a fire-style, Great Fireball, but Chojuro easily sliced the fireball in half with his sword. He then lunged at Kagami. She weaved and dodged his attacks before launching another fire-style, Great Fireball. Chojuro countered with a water-style, Water Bullet, causing the two jutsu to collide and create a thick mist. From the mist, both Kagami and Chojuro walked out, completely unharmed. Using her Sharingan to read Chojuro's movements, Kagami drew her own Tanto. She began fighting at a distance, using jutsu to maintain space while using her Tanto to deflect any possible sword strikes. But Chojuro was relentless, quickly closing the gap between them. He sliced at Kagami's front, a deep gash appearing from her right shoulder to her left waist. But instead of blood, a blinding light erupted from the wound as Kagami dispersed into a bolt of lightning, the shock paralyzing Chojuro instantly. Kagami reappeared behind Chojuro and, with a surprising burst of speed, slashed at him with her Tanto. As the blade connected, Chojuro's body melted into a puddle of water. In the Kage box. The fourth Raikage, I looked impressed. So, both of them created a clone in the mist, huh? Good thinking, he said. I'm actually impressed that this brat knows the lightning clone. It's quite rare. Minato chuckled. It must be Naruto. I'm pretty sure he taught her that jutsu. Naruto? Your eldest? Mei the Mizukage asked. So he has a lightning style? He's playing things pretty secretly, Raza, the Kazekage said. He only used taijutsu and body flicker up until now. His skills are a real mystery. Not to mention he fought that genin with the 5 gates, Lee, and came out on top without a scratch. I added, a serious look on his face. Back in the arena, the real Chojuro and Kagami faced off once more. Chojuro charged up a water dragon jutsu, and Kagami countered with a fire dragon jutsu. The two jutsu clashed in a powerful collision, but the water dragon emerged victorious, slamming into Kagami with full force. Her ribs cracked on impact as she was slammed into the wall, falling to the ground, unconscious. The winner is Chojuro, Gunma shouted, his voice a powerful exclamation that echoed throughout the stadium. At infirmary, Kagami's eyes fluttered open to the sterile smell of the infirmary. The first thing she saw was a plain white ceiling. She felt a light weight on her thighs and looked down to see Yuki sleeping there, her head resting peacefully. Kagami turned her head to the right and saw Naruto looking out the window. "Took you long enough," he said, without looking back. "Don't tell me you waited here instead of watching the fight," she said with a huff. But inside, a wave of warmth washed over her. She was genuinely happy that someone had waited for her. Even within her own family, Itachi was the only one who had truly cared for her besides her mother. Unlike Itachi or Sasuke, she wasn't a prodigy, and as such, her father mostly ignored her. "The fight doesn't matter," Naruto said, his gaze still fixed on the window. "You do. Besides, I've got a nice view from here." Kagami hitched, a faint blush marking her cheeks. Looking at Naruto, she couldn't hide the warmth that spread through her, even if she tried. "Fill me in," she said softly. The remaining 2 fights of the first bracket were won by Kuratsuchi of the Stone and Fu of the Waterfall, Naruto explained. And with that, the first bracket is officially over. The second bracket will start 2 days from now. "The first fight of the second bracket is between me and Chojuro," Naruto said, finally turning to face Kagami. "The second fight is between Yuki and Minma. The third is between Gaara and Temari, and the fourth and final one is between Kuratsuchi and Fu." Naruto walked towards Kagami and gently touched her already pink cheeks. "How are you feeling?" he asked softly. "Good," she said softly. "Don't lie," Naruto replied, his gaze unwavering. By this time, Yuki had woken up. "Kagami-chan, are you all right?" "I was so worried," she said groggily as she woke up fully. Kagami sighed, dropping the act. "I'm not feeling all right, okay? The Chunin exams were supposed to be my chance to prove that I'm strong, and now I didn't even make it to the second bracket." She felt a sudden wave of exhaustion. Yuki hugged her tightly. "You don't need to prove yourself. Not to us, anyway. We'll always be Team 12. Kagami returned Yuki's hug, a sense of calm washing over her. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft with gratitude. She knew that no matter what, Team 12 would always be there for her. Naruto, despite his attempts to remain calm and aloof, couldn't help but let a small smile creep onto his face. They were interrupted by a knock on the door. Naruto went to open it and found Itachi and Mikoto standing there. He gave a respectful bow and let them enter. Mikoto went straight to hug Kagami, who had just been released from Yuki's hold. Naruto and Yuki, seeing the reunion, decided to leave. They gave a respectful nod to Itachi and Mikoto before quietly slipping out, giving Kagami some much-needed alone time with her family. At Namake's household, Yuki and Naruto made their way to the Namake's household, the familiar sights of the village of Konoha a welcome comfort after the intensity of the Chunin exams. The walk was quiet, a comfortable silence between them as they processed the events of the day. When they arrived, the scent of a home-cooked meal greeted them at the door. Kushina, her fiery red hair tied back, was in the kitchen, humming to herself as she stirred a pot. "Naruto, Yuki-chan, you're just in time," she exclaimed, her voice full of warmth and cheer. "Dinner's almost ready." Minato was in the living room, a book in his hand, but his eyes were on the television, which was replaying some of the day's matches. He looked up and gave them a soft, welcoming smile. "Welcome back. You two must be exhausted. Come sit." As they settled in, the topic of the exams came up naturally. Yuki recounted her grueling fight with Yujito, and Naruto spoke about his friends' performances. They discussed the upcoming bracket and the formidable opponents ahead. After dinner, A more relaxed atmosphere settled over the house. Minato and Kushina shared stories from their own Jinin days, and the laughter and easy conversation filled the air. Yuki and Naruto felt a sense of peace they hadn't felt all day. They were home, surrounded by people who cared, and for a moment, the pressures of the Chunin exams seemed to fade away. Just as Yuki was about to take a seat, Kushina, unable to hold herself back, pounced on her, wrapping the younger girl in a tight hug. "Yuki-chan, that was incredible," she exclaimed, her voice full of pride. "Your ice style is amazing." Kushina approached Naruto and wrapped him in a tight hug. "I'm so proud of you, son," she whispered. "You're growing into such a fine ninja." Minma sauntered over to where Yuki was resting. "So, the second round is between us, huh?" he remarked. He had watched her fight against Yujito, taking note of her brutal efficiency. Their upcoming match felt less like a simple tournament bout and more like a culmination of their shared training under Naruto. It was a familiar scenario in the shinobi world. Two comrades, forged by the same fire, now facing each other to see who had grown stronger. Yuki gave a respectful nod. "Yes, it is, and I fully intend to win." Mito suddenly appeared, interrupting the tense moment. "Yuki, your ice release was so amazing," she exclaimed. "I never knew it could be so strong." "Hey, come on, my fight was also good," Minma said to Mito, clearly jealous of the attention Yuki was getting. Meanwhile, Minato approached Naruto as he was about to head to his room. "Naruto, can we talk for a moment?" he asked, his voice low and serious. Naruto paused, sensing the change in his father's tone. "Sure, Dad." Minato led him to the living room. "The other Kage, they've all been talking. They've noticed you're holding back. I noticed it too, against Lee and your other opponents." He paused, looking directly at his son. "What are your full abilities, Naruto? And why are you keeping them a secret?" "Is it really necessary?" Naruto asked in a calm voice. "I would like to keep my abilities hidden for as long as I can." Minato leaned back, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Is this about the tournament, Naruto, or something else entirely?" "Not just the tournament," Naruto replied calmly. "You said it yourself, Dad. That deception is the greatest tool of a shinobi. So while I'm showing my skills at the tournament, I'm also keeping most of them hidden should the need arise." A proud, knowing smile spread across Minato's face. He simply nodded, his eyes filled with a mix of fatherly pride and respect for a fellow shinobi. "I see," he said. "It's a wise strategy." Naruto went into his room and, seeing Yuki, went straight to her. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her into a tight hug, and they collapsed onto the bed together. They lay there for a long while, sprawled among each other, finding a quiet comfort in the tangle of their limbs. Naruto held Yuki close, their bodies a warm and comforting weight against each other on the bed. He buried his face in her hair, inhaling her familiar scent as he wrapped his arms tightly around her. Yuki snuggled closer, her head resting on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. He gently tipped her chin up and kissed her softly on the lips, a simple, loving gesture. "You were incredible today, you know that? You won." Yuki sighed, her voice muffled. "I did, but it took everything. I'm so exhausted, Naruto. I've never had to push myself that far before." A hint of vulnerability laced her words. "I know," Naruto said, his voice soft and reassuring. "But look at what you did. That ice dragon and the Buddha statue. Those jutsu were on a whole other level. You pushed yourself to a whole new height, and you came out on top. That's what a true shinobi does." He pulled her back into a hug, running his hand soothingly through her hair. "I couldn't be more proud of you. And it's okay to be exhausted. You earned it." Yuki sighed contentedly, her arms tightening around his waist. "Thank you, Naruto," she whispered. "For everything." Naruto shifted, pulling Yuki closer until she was completely nestled against him, their bodies a comforting weight on the bed. He held her tightly as she snuggled into his chest, her arms wrapping around his waist. They lay in a peaceful silence for a long time, simply soaking in the quiet comfort of being together. Finally, Yuki broke the silence, her voice soft against his shirt. "I feel so lucky," she began, a hint of vulnerability in her tone. "My whole life, my family saw my ice release as a curse, something that made me a monster. They left me behind. I was always alone, but then I found you." She tightened her grip on him. You saw me for who I am, not for what my power is. Naruto held her even tighter, a profound sense of understanding settling between them. I know what it's like to be alone, he said, his voice quiet. My family was there, but it was like I was invisible. My father was busy, my mother was absent. I was on my own until my isolation just turned into independence. He gently kissed the top of her head. But finding you, it's the first time I've ever felt like I wasn't just independent. It's the first time I've felt like I truly belong. They held each other for a while longer, a mutual sense of peace and security washing over them. They were not just a couple, but two people who understood what it meant to be left behind, and who had finally found a home in each other. Naruto held Yuki close, their bodies a warm and comforting weight against each other on the bed. The exhaustion of the day slowly melted away, replaced by a quiet, peaceful contentment. What's on your mind? Naruto asked, his voice a soft murmur. Yuki was silent for a moment, a small smile on her face. I was just thinking, she began. After all this is over, we should go somewhere. Away from the village for a little while. Maybe we could go to the hot springs and get away from all the noise. Naruto's arms tightened around her. You're thinking about hot springs and not ramen? He teased, a playful note in his voice. I'm surprised. Well, you'd find a ramen shop even in the most remote of locations, Yuki said with a small chuckle. But seriously, I just want a day where it's just us. No missions, no exams, no stress. Sounds perfect, Naruto replied, burying his face in her hair. Anywhere with you, Yuki. Anywhere at all. The gentle conversation slowly faded into comfortable silence. Soon, their breathing became steady, and even as they both drifted off to sleep, held securely in each other's arms. Sunlight streamed through the window, slowly waking them. Naruto and Yuki stirred, still securely wrapped in each other's arms, their bodies a warm, comfortable tangle on the bed. They simply lay there for a moment, slowly waking up in the peaceful safety of their shared embrace. Naruto stirred first, his grip on Yuki tightening instinctively. He slowly opened his eyes, a soft, contented smile spreading across his lips as he found her face inches from ice. He leaned in and pressed a tender kiss to her forehead. Yuki stirred, a sleepy smile gracing her own lips as she instinctively nuzzled closer into his chest. Naruto held her tighter, pulling her fully into his warmth, and they settled back into a quiet, peaceful cuddle. Yuki nestled soundly against his chest, her breathing a gentle, steady rhythm. A smile of pure contentment spread across his face as he took in the sight of her peacefully sleeping. He gently reached up and tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. Without even opening her eyes, Yuki stirred with a soft, sleepy hum, her body instinctively nuzzling deeper into his warmth. She tightened her hold on his shirt, a small, adorable frown creasing her brow for a moment before her expression softened back into perfect peace. Naruto chuckled silently, burying his face in her hair and holding her a little tighter, cherishing the quiet moment of pure, innocent affection. Naruto stirred, his grip on Yuki tightening as he burrowed his face into her hair. Are you a sleepyhead? He mumbled, his voice a soft, morning rasp. Yuki hummed in contentment without opening her eyes. You're just loud, Naruto, she replied playfully. Hey, he protested, though a smile was evident in his voice. I'm not loud. I'm just a very enthusiastic ray of sunshine. Yuki chuckled, a soft sound against his chest. Then you're a very loud ray of sunshine, she teased, finally looking up at him. And you know, this is my favorite time of day. Naruto's smile softened. Mine too, he whispered, holding her a little tighter. There's nowhere else in the world I'd rather be. Today we have a free day, what will you do? Yuki asked, her voice impossibly cute as she snuggled closer. Naruto's arms tightened around her. I'll spend the day holding you, he replied, a soft, loving smile on his face. Yuki shifted, getting on top of Naruto and straddling his waist. Her hands came up to cup his cheeks, and a soft smile touched her lips. Naruto's hands came to rest gently on her waist as she leaned in and kissed him. Just as the kiss ended, the door to Naruto's room slid open. Kushina stepped inside, and her eyes immediately landed on the two of them. A high-pitched squeal of pure joy escaped her lips, echoing through the room. Yuki's eyes went wide in mortification. A deep blush instantly spread across her cheeks, and she buried her face in Naruto's chest. Naruto's own smile widened as he simply held her tighter, a fond chuckle rumbling beneath her ear. "You were supposed to knock," Naruto yelled, his voice a mix of exasperation and embarrassment. "I'm your mother, young man, and I don't need permission to enter my son's room," Kushina said, her voice a playful scolding. "Besides, breakfast is ready. Unless you two want to continue," she added with a mischievous grin. "The moment's gone. You ruined the mood," Naruto grumbled, burying his face in Yuki's hair. At the breakfast table, the atmosphere was lively, with Kushina doing most of the talking. She kept glancing at Yuki with a mischievous glint in her eye. "So, Yuki-chan," Kushina began, a wide grin spreading across her face. "Did you sleep well? You look so rested this morning." A blush instantly crept up Yuki's neck. She took a quick bite of her toast to avoid answering. "Why yes, Kushina-san. I did." "Oh, please, just call me Kushina. We're practically family now, aren't we?" she chirped, winking at Minato, who was trying to stifle a chuckle behind his teacup. "Mom, stop it," Naruto grumbled, pushing a piece of bacon around his plate. "Stop what?" Kushina said innocently, though her smile was anything but. "I'm just making an observation. It's so nice to see you two getting along so well. My son's been so much happier since you came along." Yuki's blush deepened, but a small, shy smile finally broke through. She glanced at Naruto, whose ears were now bright red, and felt a quiet happiness settle in her heart. Minma, missing the point entirely, just nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, it's awesome having Yuki and Naruto as a couple. I can't wait for the second round to start," he added, completely oblivious to the double meaning of his words. Minato just watched the scene unfold, a faint, amused smile on his face. Kushina choked on her bread, her face turning a deep shade of red from a mix of laughter and surprise as Minma's words finally registered. Yuki, already flustered, buried her face even deeper into Naruto's shoulder. "Minma, why would you just say that out loud?" Naruto hissed, his own face burning with embarrassment. "Say what?" Minma asked, completely oblivious, as he watched his mother desperately trying to catch her breath. "Is she okay?" Mito looked at Naruto, her expression genuinely confused. "What did Minma say?" she asked, her voice soft and innocent. Naruto groaned, burying his face in his hands. "Nothing, Mito," he mumbled from behind his fingers. "Don't worry about it." As the day progressed, Naruto and Yuki found themselves walking through Konoha's bustling marketplace. The stalls were filled with vibrant colors, and the air hummed with the chatter of vendors and villagers. But amidst the noise, a quiet shift occurred. As they walked, people began to fall silent, their eyes following the two of them. Their impressive performance at the Chunin exams, coupled with their undeniable connection to the Hokage family, had earned them a reputation that preceded them. Naruto felt the stares. They weren't the cold, disdainful looks he had grown up with. These were filled with awe, curiosity, and respect. It was a strange and new feeling. Yuki, sensing the weight of the gazes, instinctively moved closer to him, her hand tightening in his. Naruto gave her hand a reassuring squeeze, a silent promise that no matter how much their reputation grew, they would always have each other. A female figure, rushing through the crowd, bumped directly into Naruto. She turned quickly to apologize, but her words died in her throat. She froze, her wide onyx eyes fixed on his face, something akin to longing swimming in their depths. "Naruto?" she asked, her voice a hushed whisper. "Shizune-san?" Naruto asked, his voice still filled with shock. "It's been quite a while." Shizune's onyx eyes filled with tears, and the longing in them was replaced by a look of profound relief. A wide, teary smile spread across her face. "Naruto," she whispered, her hand coming up to gently cup his cheek. Yuki watched the exchange, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. "Ne-san," she thought to herself, a question forming in her mind about this new connection in Naruto's life. "Who is she, Naruto?" Yuki asked, moving instinctively closer to him, her hand tightening around his. "She's my Ne-san," Naruto replied, a faint blush on his cheeks from a hint of embarrassment. "She used to patch me up every time I got hurt while training, and that used to happen a lot." Shizune's teary smile widened at his words. "That's right. she said softly. You were always getting yourself into trouble. But look at you now, she added, her eyes sweeping over him with a sense of awe. You've grown into such a fine young man. What have you been up to? Naruto asked, his voice full of genuine curiosity. Shizune sighed, a fond smile gracing her lips as she gently reached out and ruffled his hair. What can I say? Ever since Lady Tsunade left the hospital to me, I haven't gotten a single second to breathe. But I did watch your Chunin exams fight, and you've gotten so much stronger. Naruto swatted her hand away with a playful scowl. I'm not a kid anymore, he said. Yes, you are, Shizune retorted, her fond smile unwavering. Her gaze then shifted to Yuki, her expression softening with curiosity. Besides, who's the pretty girl? She asked. Naruto's cheeks flushed as he nervously wrapped his arm around Yuki's waist, pulling her closer. Well, you know, she's my future wife, he said, his voice a little strained. Yuki's eyes went wide, and a deep blush instantly colored her cheeks as she buried her face in his shoulder. Shizune's eyes widened in surprise as she processed his words. You mean she's the Yuki girl that Lady Tsunade and Kushina are talking about so much? She asked, a surprised but knowing smile beginning to form on her face. After a fond date with Yuki and the unexpected, emotional reunion with Shizune, Naruto and Yuki spent the rest of the day in quiet contentment. They returned to the Namikaze household, the familiar warmth of the home a welcome comfort after the bustling marketplace. The evening was spent in a peaceful lull, with dinner and quiet conversation with Kushina and Minato. Later, they found themselves curled up on the couch, simply enjoying the stillness. The day, which had started with the pressures of the Chunin exams, ended with the simple peace of being together. The next day, the Chunin exam stadium was a roaring sea of noise and anticipation. Sunlight beat down on the arena, illuminating the final combatants gathered on the field. The air was thick with the energy of the thousands of spectators who had come to watch the second round. Naruto and Yuki stood side by side, their hands clasped between them. The peaceful, shared mourning had given way to a quiet, focused intensity. While the crowd roared around them, their attention was solely on each other. The other genin waited nearby, their faces a mix of nervousness and fierce determination. Minma stood a short distance away, his eyes focused and calm, while a timid-looking boy from the Mist Village, Chojuro, quietly checked the blade of his sword. The moment they had all been preparing for had finally arrived. A shinobi with a gaunt face and a raspy cough, the proctor, stepped forward to the center of the arena. He held a clipboard in his hand. Welcome, all, to the second round of the Chunin exams, he announced, his voice amplified by chakra. After the grueling preliminary bouts and the first bracket, only the strongest remain. The rules are simple. Fight until one competitor is unable to continue or gives up. Now, for the final bracket. He paused, a palpable hush falling over the stadium as the crowd held its breath. Chojuro versus Naruto Namikaze. Chojuro jumped down into the center of the arena, the hilt of his twin-bladed sword, Hiramakiri, gripped firmly in his hands. He took a battle stance, his expression timid yet resolute. Suddenly, a swirling vortex of crows appeared above Naruto's spot on the field. The flock dispersed in an instant, revealing Naruto standing perfectly still in their place. He had arrived using a new variation of the body flicker, a crow body flicker. Chojuro held his sword out in front of him, ready to strike. But Naruto just stood there, his hands at his sides, his demeanor completely calm. Attached to his back, without a saya, was a katana of his own. The blade was wrapped in a pure white bandage, obscuring the katana's true nature. In one fluid, gentle motion, Naruto reached back and gripped the tsuka of his katana. He drew the blade from the bandages wrapped around it, the pure white cloth falling away to reveal a sight that sent a wave of gasps through the stadium. The blade was not steel, but a slick, bluish obsidian, its surface made up of countless tiny, interconnected scales. It was a living weapon, much like the one wielded by the former swordsman of the mist, a samahata in the form of a katana. A collective gasp rippled through the stadium, a murmur of shock that even reached the elevated kage box. The scales of Naruto's katana glistened with a breathtaking bluish-purple hue, its surface shimmering as if alive. On the field, Chojuro's eyes widened, a flicker of genuine shock crossing his face as he stared at the strange, living blade. The timid expression he wore moments before was replaced with one of cautious respect as he tightened his grip on his own katana. The fight began with a flash of steel. Chojuro lunged forward, his twin-bladed katana a blur of motion, but Naruto met every strike with his own obsidian blade. The clashing of steel echoed through the arena as their kenjutsu proved to be an equal match, neither able to gain the upper hand. Realizing a stalemate in blades, Chojuro jumped back, weaving hand signs. "Water style, water bullet," he called out, unleashing a torrent of high-pressured water. Naruto's hands flew into a different series of seals. "Wind style, wind bullet." A powerful blast of wind erupted from his mouth, meeting the water jutsu head-on and instantly neutralizing it with a burst of steam. Before the steam could even clear, Naruto wove new seals. "Flame style, phoenix fire." A volley of fireballs shot toward Chojuro. The wind he had just created whipped the flames into a powerful inferno, enhancing their power. The now superheated flames clashed with the remaining moisture in the air and overpowered it, hitting Chojuro squarely. Before Chojuro could even fully recover from the searing heat of the flames, Naruto vanished and reappeared directly in front of him using a body flicker. He immediately engaged Chojuro in a second round of kenjutsu. This time, however, a vibrant blue aura of lightning chakra crackled to life around Naruto's obsidian blade. The electrified katana moved with an even greater speed, its every clang against Chojuro's twin blades sending a jolt of electricity that traveled up the enemy's arms. Chojuro was forced on the defensive, his movements becoming sluggish as Naruto's attacks continuously gained the upper hand. In the Kage box, the leaders watched the battle in stunned silence, their collective gasp echoing the crowds. "He has three elements." The Raikage said, leaning forward in his seat, his voice low with grudging respect. "Impressive." Raza, the Kazekage, his gaze fixed on Naruto's blade, muttered, "That katana could be a problem." Mei, the Mizukage, nodded, her expression grim. "If I'm correct, the blade can switch and change its shape, and it can eat chakra too. How did he get something like that?" Inoki, the Tsuchikage, demanded, his voice full of curiosity and concern. Minato just shook his head slowly, a faint, bewildered smile on his face as he watched his son fight. "Honestly, even I don't know at this point," he admitted, his eyes never leaving the arena. Back at arena, as Chojuro recovered, Naruto took the opportunity to cast a low-level genjutsu, a quiet and unexpected move. For just a fraction of a second, the world around Chojuro shifted, and he froze, his mind briefly thrown off guard. It was all the time Naruto needed. He vanished again with his body flicker, reappearing behind Chojuro and quickly disarming him with a graceful, precise strike of his katana, the blade of Hiramakiri clattering to the ground. Naruto's own katana came to rest at Chojuro's throat, but it was just a mock threat. Chojuro, defeated, simply nodded in silent acknowledgement. "Winner, Naruto Namikaze." The proctor's voice boomed, and the stadium erupted into thunderous applause. Round 2. "Now, for our next match." The proctor's voice boomed over the cheering crowd. The sound of their applause had just begun to die down from Naruto's impressive victory. The second match of the finals will be Minma Namikaze versus Yuki of the Leaf. As the words echoed through the stadium, a hush fell over the crowd. This was not just a match between two talented genin. It was a battle between two individuals who had trained under the same mentor and were both considered family by the fourth Hokage. Minma's eyes lit up, a wide, confident grin spreading across his face. He jumped down to the center of the arena, his body buzzing with excitement. Yuki, on the other hand, was more reserved. She took a deep breath, her hands clasped together as she moved to the ring. This wasn't a fight against a rival, but a chance to prove herself to a family she had only recently found. The two of them stood a respectful distance apart, ready for the signal to begin. Minma started the match, his hands quickly weaving a series of hand signs. Wind style, wind bullet, he called out, unleashing a focused blast of wind directly at Yuki. Yuki's hands moved with equal speed, but her movements were more fluid. Wind style, wind wall, she countered, summoning a massive, swirling barrier of wind in front of her. The two jutsus collided with a deafening crash, creating a powerful shockwave that swept through the arena. The force of the gale was so strong that it kicked up dust and debris from the ground, temporarily obscuring both fighters from view. Yuki didn't give Minma a moment to recover. She formed a one-handed seal, and an intricate dome of ice shot up from the ground, encasing Minma entirely. He was trapped within the shimmering ice mirror dome. Before he could even register what had happened, Yuki began to rain razor-sharp ice needles down upon him. The needles descended at insane speeds, their numbers so great that Minma was unable to dodge and had no choice but to brace for the impact. A guttural roar echoed from within the ice dome. A ripple of malevolent, crimson chakra pulsed from within, and a faint fox-like shape flickered around Minma's body. With a deafening crack, the ice dome shattered into 1,000 pieces, revealing Minma standing unharmed, enveloped in a cloak of red, bubbling chakra. His eyes were slit, and the nine tails chakra swirled menacingly around him. He immediately charged at Yuki, his movements faster and more erratic, relying on the raw power now at his disposal. Yuki, however, kept her distance. She recognized the immense power of the nine tails chakra and wisely chose not to engage in a physical match. Instead, she began to terraform the arena. Ice-release chakra surged from her feet, and the ground began to freeze over, the landscape transforming into a jagged, treacherous maze of her own design, all to gain the advantage. With a powerful roar, Minma created a Rasengan in his hand and leaped at Yuki, intending to end the fight in a single, decisive blow. The spiraling sphere of chakra hummed with immense power, and he moved with a speed that left a blur in his wake. Yuki, however, remained calm. As Minma got within striking distance, she quickly wove a hand seal and created a shimmering water mirror directly in his path. The moment the Rasengan made contact, it didn't explode or dissipate. Instead, the glassy surface of the mirror reflected the attack back at Minma, the spiraling sphere of chakra now hurtling back toward him at a terrifying speed. Minma's eyes widened in shock as he was hit by his own reflected Rasengan. The attack sent him skidding back across the arena floor, the raw energy of the jutsu burning through his chakra cloak and leaving him stunned. Yuki didn't give him a second to recover. She formed a hand seal, and from the frozen ground, two massive ice dragons erupted. They soared through the air and slammed into Minma with immense force, one after the other, knocking him completely unconscious. As the ice dragons melted back into the ground, leaving Minma in a heap, the proctor's voice boomed across the stadium. Winner, Yuki of the Leaf. In the infirmary, the atmosphere was one of quiet concern. Kushina and Mito sat by Minma's side, watching over him as a medic ninja ran a final check. Minma was still unconscious from Yuki's final attack, but the medic assured them he would be fine. Kushina gently held his hand, a worried frown on her face. Meanwhile, in a separate part of the room, Naruto sat beside Yuki. She wasn't truly hurt. Her ice release had shielded her from any real damage. Despite this, Naruto's concern was palpable. He held her hand, gently examining her fingers as if searching for an injury that wasn't there. Naruto, I'm fine, Yuki whispered, her voice soft and reassuring. I'm not hurt, not really. He looked at her, his expression a mix of relief and lingering worry. I know, he said, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. I just needed to be sure. Naruto looked down at his unconscious brother, his expression calm. He'll be fine, he said, his voice quiet but full of certainty. He has the healing from the Nine Tails chakra. Kushina's worried frown finally began to melt away, a wave of relief washing over her. She looked at Naruto, a newfound pride in her eyes as she saw the confident ninja her son had become. Yuki watched the exchange, a sense of guilt finally lifting from her shoulders. She looked at Minma, then back at Naruto, a grateful, loving smile on her face. Third bracket. The Chunin Exam Stadium was electric with a different kind of energy. The wild roars of the crowd had been replaced by a focused hum of anticipation. Only a few contestants remained, their numbers a stark reminder of the grueling battles that had brought them to this final stage. Naruto and Yuki stood together, their hands clasped. They had navigated the tournament with a fierce determination, and now they were here, at the threshold of the final bracket. The family in the Kage box, Kushina, Minato, Minma, and Mito, watched with a mix of excitement and nervous pride. At the center of the arena, the proctor cleared his throat, his voice cutting through the silence. "Welcome to the final bracket of the Chunin exams," he announced. "These final matches will determine who among you will be promoted to the rank of Chunin." He held up his clipboard, scanning the names. "Our first match of the final bracket is..." He paused for dramatic effect. "Naruto Namikaze versus Gaara of the Desert," the proctor's voice boomed. The stadium was silent for a moment before a wave of nervous murmurs swept through the stands. Gaara's reputation was well known, and the fear he inspired was palpable. A figure clad in a simple black jumpsuit began to descend from the bleachers, a large gourd attached to his back. His face was devoid of emotion, and his eyes, ringed by dark circles, held a cold, detached menace. As he stepped onto the arena floor, a low rumble came from the gourd, and a few grains of sand obediently swirled around his feet. Naruto's expression was calm, all traces of his usual playful demeanor gone. This was no ordinary opponent. This was a Jinchuriki, but one who had been twisted by a life of hatred and isolation. Naruto knew this would be his most difficult fight yet. The two of them stood at the center of the arena, a tense silence settling between them as the crowd held its breath. The stage was set. As Gaara's gaze remained fixed and cold, Naruto's own eyes underwent a sudden, terrifying transformation. The deep blue of his irises swirled into a vibrant crimson, and the tomo within them fused together, twisting into a six-pointed pinwheel that spun with a sickening rhythm. Simultaneously, he reached back and drew his obsidian katana. The Mangekyo Sharingan blazed to life in his eyes. A profound, deathly hush fell over the entire stadium. In front of a boy with a legacy of loneliness and hatred stood another, but his eyes held a power that was legendary, a forbidden dojutsu of the Uchiha, awakened by only a handful of people in the history of shinobi. The air itself seemed to crackle with the weight of the moment, as all eyes in the stadium, from the fearful crowd to the stunned Kage, were fixed on Naruto. The proctor's signal was a mere formality. Naruto moved in an instant, a blur of motion as he rushed at Gaara. His obsidian blade, the Kirin no Uroko, was already in his hand, a humming crackle of electricity dancing across its scaled surface. Gaara's sand, ever present and ever vigilant, shot up in a thick, defensive wall to meet Naruto's charge. But as the Kirin no Uroko made contact, it didn't clash or stop. Instead, the sword sliced through the sand shield as if it were nothing but air. The sand, drained of its chakra, turned to a dull, lifeless gray and fell harmlessly to the ground, leaving a clean, straight line of destruction through Gaara's absolute defense. For the first time, Gaara's cold mask of indifference broke, his eyes widening in stunned disbelief. Having relied on his sand for his entire life, Gaara had no experience with ninjutsu or taijutsu. A wave of panic washed over him as his ultimate defense failed, and in his desperation, he lashed out, sending every grain of sand he could muster in a chaotic, uncontrolled wave toward Naruto. But Naruto dodged the frantic assault effortlessly, his movements a fluid blur. The wild, thrashing sand was no match for his focused speed. In the same moment, Naruto was behind Gaara. The Kirin no Uroko moved with silent precision, slicing across Gaara's back. A thin line of crimson welled up where the blade cut, proving that for the first time, Naruto had broken through not just the sand shield, but Gaara's physical defense itself. Naruto moved with blinding speed, a focused expression on his face. Without hesitation, he drove his katana through Gaara's shoulder. The blade passed cleanly through, a testament to its unnerving power. Gaara's eyes widened in a mix of shock and pain, and his sand, which had been swirling menacingly around him, fell limply to the ground. Winner, Naruto Namikaze. The proctor's voice boomed across the silent arena. The proctor's voice was still echoing in the stadium when Gaara's composure finally shattered. His eyes, already wide with a mix of pain and disbelief, filled with a sudden, pure terror. He stared at the thin line of red on his shoulder, a phenomenon he had never truly experienced. "Blood! It's my blood!" he shrieked, his voice raw with fear. The sand on the ground and from his gourd surged, wrapping around the right side of his body with a new, menacing ferocity. It formed a monstrous limb and a gigantic, demonic face, taking on the grotesque features of the one-tailed demon, Shikaku. The once celebrating crowd's cheers died in their throats, replaced by a horrified silence as they looked up at the boy who had just lost control. Naruto jumped back, his eyes still blazing with the six-pointed Mangekyo pattern, as Gaara's transformation began in earnest. The sand from his gourd and the surrounding arena floor surged around him, rapidly consuming his body. With a monstrous roar, the sand sculpted itself into the full, monstrous form of the one-tailed demon, Shikaku. The stadium, once filled with the hushed terror of the crowd, now held a terrified silence as a gigantic, Sanden Chakra beast towered over the arena. The sheer scale of the demon was a sight to behold. Its massive, one-tailed form was menacing, and its eyes burned with a malevolent rage. The match was no longer a battle between two genin, but a standoff between a shinobi and a tailed beast. "Ematsuhiko!" Naruto roared, his voice echoing with an otherworldly power. The very next moment, his left eye began to bleed. The moon, hanging high above the arena, seemed to warp, its light reflecting the six-pointed pinwheel of his Mangekyo Sharingan onto the ground. A crimson veil descended over the entire stadium, and the world itself turned a jarring shade of red. Every single shinobi, every genin, chunin, jonin, and even the Kage was hit by a crushing pressure. It was an invisible force, a weight that was equal to, if not greater than, the raw, unfiltered chakra of the One Tail. It was the effect of Naruto's Mangekyo ability. Inside the veil, everyone's chakra network was disrupted, making it drastically harder to form and use jutsu. While the primary function of Amatsuhiko was to nullify Jinjutsu, when concentrated to a single point, the veil could even nullify ninjutsu entirely. The match was now truly a battle between the ultimate Jinchuriki and the boy who wielded a power that could change reality itself. Naruto lunged back and lifted a single hand to the sky. From the heavens, a deafening roar of thunder echoed, and a massive, blue-white bolt of lightning, shaped like a mythical beast, descended upon the towering form of Shikaku. It was a true Kirin, a force of nature itself. The bolt struck the giant sand monster with an unimaginable force, and its entire body exploded into a cloud of sand and chakra. Before the dust could even settle, Naruto, moving at a speed no one could track, was at the head of the crumbling beast. He reached into the fading mass of sand and pulled out the small, unconscious form of Gaara. The battle was finally over. The cost of such immense power was immediate and absolute. Having overused his Mangekyo Sharingan and expended the last of his chakra on the Kirin, Naruto's body finally gave out. He collapsed to the floor, his vision fading to black. The two genin, one a victor and one a vanquished foe, lay side by side on the broken, dusty ground of the arena, their battle finally over. A stunned silence descended upon the stadium as the crowd realized their hero had also been taken down by the sheer cost of his victory. Naruto felt a familiar weight on his chest as he slowly came to. He blinked, his eyes adjusting to the sterile white walls and soft glow of the hospital room. He was in a bed, a faint humming of medical equipment in the background. His heart swelled with a quiet warmth as he realized what the weight was. Yuki was sleeping soundly on his chest, her head resting just below his chin, her hair a cascade of black against his. Without making a sound, Naruto carefully and gently wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. He was exhausted, but in that quiet, peaceful moment, he felt more at home than he ever had. Finally awake, a voice said from across the room. Naruto's head turned, and he saw his father, Minato, standing in the doorway, a look of relief on his face. Everyone was worried. Minato walked toward the bed, his gaze softening as he looked down at Yuki, still sleeping on Naruto's chest. Should I send in Kushina? She isn't herself. Naruto's brow furrowed. What happened? How long was I gone? 2 days, Minato answered, sitting on the edge of the bed. The Chunin exams are over. Yuki here was the winner of the tournament. He paused, a shadow passing over his face. And in those 2 days, Kushina hasn't eaten anything, just crying in a corner. When you used that jutsu, Kushina's chakra chains were nullified, and she couldn't restrain the one-tails. She blames herself for that. Naruto nodded and watched as Minato quietly left the room. A few moments later, the door slowly opened again. It wasn't the usual energetic entrance Naruto had come to expect from his mother. Instead, Kushina stepped in hesitantly, as if she were afraid to approach. Her eyes were red-rimmed and her face was pale, a clear sign she had spent the last 2 days consumed by worry. A heavy silence filled the room. Naruto had expected her to rush to him, to hug him tightly and scold him for worrying her, but she just stood there, her hands clasped together. Her guilt was so palpable it felt like its own presence in the sterile room. "How are you?" Kushina asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah, what can happen to me?" Naruto replied, his voice a little too loud in his clumsy attempt to sound casual. Naruto looked at her, his voice softening. "You do realize that I used the veil to keep you and Dad out?" he said, his gaze fixed on her face. "To keep you both safe." Kushina's eyes widened, a flicker of understanding passing through her grief. "Minato said that," she replied, her voice filled with a mix of awe and bewilderment. "But why would you do such a thing?" Naruto looked at his mother, his eyes holding a depth far beyond his years. "It's simple," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "It's my fight, and I don't want anyone else getting hurt. I used the veil to keep the one-tails from escaping and hurting others, and also to keep you and Dad out, because I don't want you to get hurt for me." The simple sincerity in his words shattered whatever remained of Kushina's composure. Her eyes welled with fresh tears, but these were not of guilt. They were tears of a mother who was utterly overwhelmed with love and pride. The guilt she had carried for the last 2 days vanished, replaced by the profound, beautiful realization that her son, whom she had tried so hard to protect, had, in fact, been protecting her. Without a word, she finally moved, wrapping her arms around him in a tight, shaking hug. Just a few moments later, Kushina re-entered the room with a tray laden with food. She sat on the edge of the bed and gently began to eat, occasionally using her chopsticks to feed Naruto small, tender bites. It was a silent act of love, a simple way of showing that the emotional chasm between them had been completely bridged. Yuki remained soundly asleep on Naruto's chest, oblivious to the quiet reunion. She too was utterly exhausted after her own grueling battle, her final match being against the Seven-Tails Jinchuriki, Fu. While Fu hadn't used her tailed beast and wasn't as powerful as Gaara, the fight had been long and hard-fought, and the toll it took on Yuki was now evident in her deep, peaceful sleep. The two victors lay side by side, their battle scars a testament to their hard-earned wins. The rest of the day went by in peaceful, relative silence. Visitors weren't allowed, leaving the hospital room a quiet sanctuary. Kushina had gone, but not without leaving a tray of food and a loving kiss for her son. The world outside the room was forgotten, replaced by a still and calm atmosphere. Naruto, finally able to rest, simply lay in bed, the quiet hum of the medical equipment the only sound besides his and Yuki's soft breathing. He remained still, not wanting to disturb her. It was a moment of perfect, exhausted peace, with the two of them side by side. The quiet peace of the hospital room was abruptly shattered as the door slid open. The hushed, sterile atmosphere was instantly replaced by a thick, heavy tension. In the doorway stood a subdued Menma, his eyes still a bit weary. But behind him, the anger was anything but subtle. It radiated off of Mito and Kagami in palpable waves. Their collective gaze landed on the bed, and their expressions soured even further. There, in their brother's bed, was Yuki, sleeping soundly on his chest. It was a clear, intimate display of affection that only fueled their fury. They said nothing, but their anger was a silent roar in the room. The quiet tension in the room broke as Mito stepped forward, her hands on her hips, a scowl on her face. Why was she allowed in here before us? She demanded, her voice cutting through the silence. Naruto, who was still holding Yuki, simply turned his head, his face a mask of exhaustion and indifference. Don't know, don't care, he said, his voice flat. Kagami let out a bitter laugh, stepping past Mito to stand in front of the bed. Yeah, why would you care? He said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. It's not like you fought a tailed beast. Maybe calm down a bit. Minma interjected, his own exhaustion evident in his voice. It's a hospital. No thank you. I'm perfectly calm, Mito and Kagami said in unison, their voices filled with a cold defiance that completely contradicted their could-face bomb, in utter exasperation. Naruto sighed, looking from Kagami to Mito, then back. Since you are here anyways, he said, his voice flat, why don't you fill me in? Hey, you can ask me that too, you know? Mito grumbled, crossing her arms. No one passed from Team 7. Minma started, ignoring her. Shino from Team 8, Niji and Lee from Team 9, Shikamaru from Team 10, only me from Team 11, and as for your team. A smug look spread across Kagami's face as soon as her team was brought up. She cut Minma off. We are the only team this year where each member passed, she announced, her voice filled with a triumphant smugness. Plus, Kagami continued, her voice filled with an even deeper smugness. Our team has been recommended for Umbu by the council, under none other than Big Brother Itachi. Kagami's chest was puffed out with pride, her victory in the tournament and her future as an Umbu seeming to swell with every word. Naruto, however, simply looked at her, then past her, a thoughtful expression on his face. Itachi Uchiha, he said, his voice quiet. A faraway look entered his eyes. I've heard about him, mostly from Shursui. He added, the last part a mere whisper. Just as Naruto uttered the last word, Yuki stirred, a soft groan escaping her lips. Her eyes fluttered open, blinking slowly before they landed on his face. Seeing him awake, a look of peaceful relief washed over her, and a faint smile touched her lips. That smile, however, faltered as she looked past him. Her gaze took in the sight of Mito, Minma, and Kagami standing at the foot of the bed, their expressions a mix of anger, frustration, and confusion. Yuki's smile vanished, replaced by a simple look of bewilderment. Yuki's eyes, filled with confusion, landed on the angry faces of the siblings. She gently tried to sit up, her gaze moving from Mito to Minma, then back to the scowling Kagami. What's going on here? She asked, her voice soft and unsure. You are stealing my brother. Mito shot back, her voice tight with anger, the words a direct, venomous accusation. Why are you here before us? Kagami added, her voice a condescending drawl. I came here to check on Naruto, and fell asleep, Yuki said with a sheepish smile, her words innocent and without any malice. The simple honesty of her statement instantly diffused the tension in the room. Mito and Kagami's angry expressions faltered, replaced by a mixture of embarrassment and awkward silence. Minma finally dropped his hand from his face, looking from his sisters to Yuki with a knowing look. The truth of the situation, free from their sibling rivalry, was laid bare for all to see. The tension in the room, which had just begun to deflate, returned with a new, worried intensity. We are forgetting the reason we came here, Minma said, his voice serious, as he looked at Naruto. Mito and Kagami, as if a switch had been flipped, immediately fixed their angry eyes on him as well. For the next half an hour, they constantly accused Naruto for being reckless and fighting a tailed beast alone. What were you thinking? Do you have a death wish? Mito scolded, her voice cracking with the strain of holding back tears. You almost gave us a heart attack, you idiot. One move, and you could have been killed. Kagami added, her usual smugness completely gone, replaced by a raw, unfiltered fear. Their words were sharp and accusatory, but beneath every complaint was a deep, palpable sense of relief and love. Were you worried about me? Naruto asked, his voice softer now, directed at Kagami. The question hit its mark. Kagami immediately stopped her accusations, and a deep blush spread across her cheeks. The Tsundere act was back in full force. Don't be an idiot, she said with a huff, desperately trying to push away her embarrassment. I was just thinking that if something happened to you, then our team record would be tainted. Your lying skills are a 10, but on a pH scale. Naruto deadpanned, a faint smirk on his face. Kagami looked confused for a moment, and a soft giggle escaped Yuki. He means your lies are pretty basic, Yuki said with a gentle, knowing smile. Kagami's face turned a darker shade of red, and she huffed again. Like, kids can lie better than you, Yuki added, her voice still quiet and sweet. Okay, I get it, Kagami mumbled, now completely flustered. Like imaginary numbers are more real than your lying skills, Yuki continued, a mischievous glint in her eyes. All right, stop, Kagami said, utterly embarrassed. Naruto's voice was gentle now. You know, admitting vulnerability won't kill you. Kagami looked down at her hands, her shoulders slumping. I know, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Hey, we are here too, Minma said, his voice quiet. He looked at Mito, who nodded in agreement. Minma's gaze shifted back to Naruto. I don't want to ruin your moment, but I wanted to ask, what is this Mangekyo Sharingan? He asked, a mix of genuine curiosity and concern in his voice. I mean those eyes. Everyone's saying you have the MS. Naruto's face, which had been a mask of quiet relief, fell into a frown. He let out a long sigh and ran a hand through his hair. I know, he said softly, his voice full of a weary resignation. I was just hoping to keep it a secret a little longer. I'm guessing Mom and Dad want an explanation too, huh? Naruto said, his gaze shifting to the open door as if his parents might appear at any moment. I'll explain it once we get home. Minma seemed to be satisfied with that. But Mito and Kagami looked anything but. Their faces were still twisted with a deep suspicion. You know it's not about you having it, Mito began, her voice low and filled with hurt. It's about you hiding it, Kagami finished, their anger finally revealing its true source. Yuki stirred on Naruto's chest and looked at the angry siblings. Look, she said, her voice soft but firm. He must have had his reasons. The tense air in the room, already heavy with unspoken feelings, thickened as a new argument broke out. Mito and Kagami, already on edge, now turned their frustration on Yuki. They saw her defense of Naruto as a direct challenge, another sign that she was turning their brother against them. Minma remained neutral, a quiet, weary observer of the new conflict. It's not your place to defend him. You don't understand our family, Mito accused, her voice filled with a raw hurt. Kagami stepped in, her own anger blazing. He trusts you with a secret he kept from his own family. We're the ones he's supposed to rely on. Yuki remained calm, her voice a soothing contrast to their fury. Trust isn't something you're owed just because you're family, she countered. It's earned. And if he trusts me, it's because I trust him. The argument went back and forth, a painful cycle of accusations and calm defenses. The anger from Mito and Kagami came from a place of fear and hurt, while Yuki's words were born of logic and unwavering loyalty. The conflict wasn't about the power of the Mangekyo, but about who Naruto belonged to and who had earned his trust. The argument finally sputtered to a stop, leaving the four of them in an exhausted, tense silence. Look, Kagami, Naruto said, his voice dropping to a low, serious tone. You do know the implications of having the Mangekyo Sharingan. Kagami's anger and smugness vanished. She looked at him, her expression turning somber, and after a moment of hesitation, she nodded. She understood the weight of the dojutsu's legend. I wanted to keep it a secret, Naruto continued, his eyes meeting hers, because I haven't mastered it. Can you all please give me some space? Naruto pleaded, his voice a soft, weary whisper. Kagami was the first to move. Her confrontation with Naruto and the subsequent humiliation had been replaced by a quiet need for answers. I'm going home, she said, her voice softer than before. I have a lot to ask Big Brother Itachi. She left without another word. Mito and Minma, their emotional outburst having exhausted them, also moved toward the door, their expressions now full of a quiet understanding. Yuki, still on Naruto's chest, gave him a gentle, loving kiss on the cheek before carefully sliding off the bed. She exchanged a silent, knowing glance with Mito before following them out. The door clicked shut, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Naruto was truly alone. He closed his eyes, a peaceful quiet finally settling over him. As the sun began to set, casting a warm orange glow over the village, Naruto walked toward the Hokage monument. He moved with a quiet purpose, his exhaustion a physical weight that had settled deep in his bones. He climbed the worn stone stairs and, with the agility of a true shinobi, scaled the face of the mountain. He came to a stop at the very top, sitting on the carved stone head of the first Hokage, Hashirama Senju. From this high vantage point, he could see all of Konoha, bathed in the fading light of the day. The world seemed so small and peaceful from here, a stark contrast to the chaos and emotional turmoil of the past 2 days. He simply sat there, watching the lights of the village begin to twinkle to life below him, a profound sense of quiet washing over him as he processed everything. Naruto sat on the carved stone head of Lord Hashirama, his thoughts drifting across the events of the last few days. The peace was short-lived, though. A subtle feeling of unease began to creep into his mind, a nagging sense that something wasn't right. He mentally retraced his steps, from the arena to the hospital, replaying the conversations, the exhaustion, the worry on his family's faces. No matter how many times he went over it, the feeling persisted. It wasn't about the fight with Gaara, or his parents' worry, or even his siblings' anger. It was something else entirely, something that had happened while he was unconscious. It was an event he couldn't remember, a piece of the puzzle that was missing, and the not knowing left a hollow, unsettling feeling in his gut. Flashback. A flash of red light and a searing pain in his left eye. Naruto found himself in an unfamiliar, yet calming, place. The sky above was a brilliant, endless blue, and beneath his feet was a vast, tranquil ocean. The water was only ankle deep, and it rippled gently around him. He was completely alone. "Welcome, son," a gentle voice came from behind him. It was a voice of a man who carried the weight of ages, calm and authoritative, yet filled with a gentle warmth. "It's been a long while," he added. Naruto's chakra flared instinctively. The six-pointed pinwheel of his Mangekyo Sharingan began to spin wildly in his crimson eyes as he turned to face the voice. Their eyes meet, and his entire body froze. Naruto turned around, his red eyes meeting the other's purple ones. "Who are you?" Naruto asked. "I'm Hagoromo Otsutsuki, but you may know me by the name of the Sage of Six Paths," said Hagoromo. "The Sage of the Six Paths? Why are you here?" "Where is here?" a confused Naruto asked. Hagoromo chuckled. "This place is your mindscape, and I'm here to solve my past mistakes," he said. "Past mistakes?" Naruto asked. A shadow passed over Hagoromo's eyes, and he looked at Naruto with a profound sense of guilt. "Yes, past mistakes," he began. "You know about the Chronicles of the Six Paths?" Hagoromo asked. Naruto nodded. "Yeah, I read those when I was a kid. You traveled throughout the world and spread Ninshu to bring people closer," Naruto said. "I had 2 sons, Ashura and Indra," Hagoromo began. "I chose Ashura as my successor and gave him my chakra, but that caused a rift between my 2 sons. Indra, feeling betrayed, left and swore to reclaim his position. But how does that relate to me?" Naruto asked, not following Hagoromo. "The fight between Indra and Ashura didn't stop," Hagoromo continued. "They began a cycle of reincarnation, but with every new life, less of them and more of their chakra reincarnated. Am I related to that in any way?" asked Naruto, on which Hagoromo nodded. "You, my son, are the incarnation of Indra." "What does that mean?" Naruto asked. Hagoromo sighed. "I'm not supposed to intervene, but I have to because of some unforeseen consequences of unintended action. The power of the Rinnegan was too much. It was a tool to control the Ten Tails." "Hold up," Naruto said. "Ten Tails? Aren't there only 9-tailed beasts?" "Long ago, there used to be a 10 tails," Hagoromo explained. "It was an extension of the divine tree, but I split it into 9 parts and made the 9-tailed beasts. If the 9-tailed beasts are brought together in the Geto Mazo, it will reform the 10 tails." "And what's the Geto Mazo?" Naruto asked. "The husk that was left behind of the 10 tails," Hagoromo answered. "Currently, it's sealed within Limbo and can only be accessed by the Rinnegan. That's why I split the Rinnegan into 2 parts. The Yin part inherited by Indra and the Yang part inherited by Ashura." "And?" Naruto prompted. "If Ashura and Indra's chakra comes together, it'll evolve the Sharingan into the Rinnegan?" "Yes," replied Hagoromo. The previous cycle of Indra and Ashura were Madara and Hashirama. And Madara somehow gained Hashirama's chakra and gained a Rinnegan. And you're afraid that Madara will summon the Ten Tails? Naruto asked. But isn't Madara dead? So what happens to the Rinnegan? Is it somewhere else? Naruto asked. I do recall the Toad Sage saying something about an orphan Uzumaki having the Rinnegan, but that was during the Third Great Shinobi War. I'm afraid I can't tell you much, but I'm here to warn you about the upcoming threat and to give you my chakra, said Hagoromo. Naruto looked at him, surprised. I trust you, Naruto. I made a mistake by giving everything to Ashura and pushing you away. But this time it'll be different, because I'll give my Yin half to you, and the Yang half to Ashura when the right time arrives, Hagoromo said. When the time arrives? Naruto asked. Hagoromo nodded. You'll be fine, won't you? And besides, Ashura is safe with Kurama. Kurama? Naruto repeated in confusion. The Nine Tails? He asked in disbelief. Mito or Menma. They are the incarnation of Ashura. Hagoromo chuckled. You're smart enough to figure the rest out on your own, he said as he disappeared. Flashback end. Naruto was sitting atop Hashirama's head on the Hokage monument. He stared out at the village, lost in thought. You left me with more questions than answers, old man. Naruto mumbled to himself. How could Madara have gained the Rinnegan? Naruto mused. Hashirama's cells? Could that be it? What are you doing here? You were supposed to come home, came a familiar yell from his sister Mito. Beside her stood his brother, Minma. I had to clear my head, Naruto said. But you're right. I should go home, he finished. He walked toward his siblings, putting one hand on Minma's shoulder and the other on Mito's. He used a body flicker to arrive at the Namikaze household with them. At home, the three Sannin, Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Orochimaru, a worried Kushina, and Minato were waiting. Before you ask me anything, I have my Mangekyo Sharingan. I've had it since I was 11, and I kept it a secret because I didn't know how to tell any of you, said Naruto. What do you mean? We're your family, for God's sake, an enraged Tsunade bellowed. She was still fuming about the stunt Naruto pulled at the Chunin finals. Orochimaru placed a hand on Tsunade's shoulder. I understand there's a big tension between you and your family, but you could have at least told me, he said in a grandfatherly voice. Yeah, well, I guess I should have, Naruto said, looking down. A Mangekyo at the age of 11, Jiraiya muttered, his voice heavy with guilt. Even Itachi didn't have it until he was 13. How did we let a potential like him live in isolation? Kushina looked as if she were about to cry. Let's hold it there, Jiraiya, Minato said. Let's not dwell on the past, especially after we've tried so hard to make amends with Naruto. Naruto, what is the ability of your Mangekyo? Minato asked. Amatsuhiko, Naruto said. It creates a veil inside which all chakra-based attacks get nullified. You should be careful, Orochimaru said, his voice a mix of caution and concern. Using the Mangekyo can make you blind. Now if you gave me Hashirama's cells, Naruto said, shocking everyone present. What do you mean? Kushina asked. Are you sure? Asked Orochimaru. That's very dangerous, Tsunade said, to which Minato and Jiraiya agreed. I know, and I'm willing to take the risk. I want you to implant Hashirama's cells in my eyes, Naruto stated. Orochimaru looked at him, then nodded in agreement. Kushina, however, was hesitant. I'll accompany Orochimaru, Tsunade said. A medical test was conducted to determine if Naruto was compatible with Hashirama's cells. The results were astounding. He wasn't just compatible, he was too compatible. His chakra resonated with Hashirama's in a way no one could understand. No one, that is, except Naruto. After his encounter with the Sage of Six Paths, he had a startling realization. Madara must have taken Hashirama's cells, and the merging of their chakras was what allowed Madara to awaken the Rinnegan. Right now, using the potential for blindness as an excuse, Naruto was trying to replicate that very process within himself. He couldn't afford to wait for the sage to give him power. He had to seize it himself. When the procedure finally finished, Naruto's body had changed significantly. He didn't look much different, except his hair now had a slight brownish tint mixed in with his original blonde. But the real change was in his chakra. The Hashirama cells didn't overtake him as they had in every previous experiment. Instead, they merged with Naruto's own cells, creating something new and incredibly powerful. Naruto had gained a healing factor greater than any previous Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. He could now use would release, but none of that came close to the fundamental change in his chakra network. Instead of regular chakra, his body was now producing an unknown Senjutsu chakra, as if he were in a permanent sage mode. His body had become significantly stronger and more durable, and he was faster and more agile. His chakra reserves were now equal to those of Minma and Mito, who each had one of the two halves of Kurama sealed inside them. After the arduous medical procedure and the subsequent flood of questions and concerns from his family, Naruto felt emotionally and physically exhausted. He retreated to his room, locking the door behind him. He went to bed with climbed into bed, and Yuki immediately curled up next to him. Naruto wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. The comfort of her presence was a welcome relief from the overwhelming events of the day. He hugged her tighter, burying his face in her hair and finding solace in the simple, quiet moment. "I'm sorry," Naruto said, his voice muffled against her. "It's okay," Yuki replied, her tone soft. She had tried to defend Naruto's decision to hide something as significant as his Mangekyo Sharingan earlier, but in truth, his act of secrecy had hurt her as well. "No, it's not okay, and I know it." "I'm sorry," Naruto said, his voice filled with regret. He leaned in and kissed her. Yuki returned the kiss, her initial hurt melting away. She nuzzled closer to him, her presence a silent message of forgiveness and comfort. "When I got my Mangekyo Sharingan, I was just so lost and hurt that I never thought about it," Naruto confessed, his voice a low whisper. "And I know I should have told you, but I didn't know how." Yuki hugged him more tightly, her embrace a warm, comforting cocoon. "It's okay. It really is. You don't have to worry. I'll love you always." "You are the most precious thing for me," Naruto said to Yuki, and he kissed her. A few weeks later, Naruto had fully recovered, his body adapting to its new state with remarkable speed. The Hashirama cells had not just integrated, but had transformed him entirely. His chakra system now constantly produced the unique Senjutsu chakra, a warm, vibrant energy that flowed through him like a river. He was in a perpetual state of heightened awareness, his senses sharper than ever at all. Yuki was a constant presence. She was more than just a caregiver. She was his anchor. She'd sit with him during his physical therapy sessions, her quiet company a source of strength. A/N. Itachi is Weasel, Naruto is Raven, Kagami is Crow, and Yuki is Leo. Team 12 stood before the desk of the fourth Hokage, Minato, who wore a friendly smile that didn't quite reach his serious eyes. Next to them stood one of the village's best, the renowned ANBU operative, Itachi Uchiha. "So, you do realize that ANBU duty is much more dangerous and terrifying compared to other missions," Minato began, his voice calm and direct. Team 12 nodded in unison. An ANBU is often given missions that include morally gray areas and require some very serious mental fortitude, he continued. "But if you are ready to take it on, I'm assigning Itachi Uchiha as your leader. Trust his judgment and follow his orders. Your team has the most potential, and for that, we have great expectations from you." Team 12 nodded, their expressions a mix of respect and apprehension, and followed Itachi out of the office. They made their way to Training Ground 12, the air growing more serious with every step. Once they arrived, Itachi turned to face them, his hands in his pockets. He regarded each of them with his calm, steady gaze. "I'm not really good at introductions," he said, his voice as composed as his demeanor. "And you all have worked together in the past, so we'll skip it for now. We will start with basic Umbu formation." The first mission for Team 12 came a week later, not in a scroll, but in a small, discreet file handed to Itachi by an ANBU messenger. They were on the training grounds when it arrived, still going through rigorous exercises designed to build their teamwork and mental resilience. Itachi dismissed the messenger and unrolled the scroll in front of the team. His face remained impassive as he read the contents. "Our first assignment," he said, his voice flat. "It's an assassination mission." The next morning, Team 12 moved out. They traveled quickly and silently through the forest, a group of four shadows in the early light. Their destination was a small town near the border. Their target was a pair of missing men from Awagakure, an assassination that would be their first true test as ANBU. Owl spoke up, her voice a low murmur. Weasel, whom are we assassinating? Two missing mean from IWA, Weasel replied, his eyes scanning the horizon. One of them is an unidentified magma release user, and the other is the Four Tails Jinchuriki. What are the rules of engagement? Leo asked, her expression serious. Stay in cover, WROE, Weasel replied. Raven, status report, Weasel said, his voice a low command. Raven, in his constant sage mode, had gained an incredible sensory skill equal to that of the Byakugan. Clear up to 800 meters, he replied, his voice a steady whisper. No sign of chakra. Owl, use your crow to scout and look for traps, Weasel ordered. And all of you, formationate. Now, we are near the destination point. The team came to a halt on the outskirts of a small clearing, their forms concealed by the thick foliage. In the center of the clearing, a small campfire flickered, illuminating a makeshift camp. Raven, Weasel said, his voice a near-silent whisper. Targets confirmed, Raven replied, his red eyes focused on the chakra signatures. What's the plan? Leo asked. Raven, follow me. We'll take the Jinchuriki, Weasel commanded, his voice a low, precise whisper. Leo and Owl will stay back and engage the unidentified Neen from a distance. Owl, you will confront the target directly with Leo providing support. Without another word, Weasel and Raven moved with synchronized stealth, slipping through the undergrowth toward the camp. Simultaneously, Owl and Leo positioned themselves on a high ridge overlooking the clearing, their gazes fixed on the two unsuspecting figures by the campfire. The silent stillness of the night was shattered as the assault began. In a flash, Weasel and Raven descended upon the camp, and hell broke loose. The Four Tails Jinchuriki, caught completely off guard, roared in fury as a cloak of red, boiling chakra erupted around him. He lunged at them with the savage power of a beast, but the two Uchiha moved with synchronized precision, their Sharingan spinning as they dodged his monstrous strikes. Simultaneously, a flurry of shuriken and kunai rained down from the ridge. Owl, a shadow in the moonlight, engaged the unidentified missing Neen, her movements a silent and deadly dance. Behind her, Leo channeled her chakra, and from the cold night air, two massive snow dragons materialized, roaring as they swooped down to assist Owl. Their icy forms a stark contrast to the magma user's fiery techniques. The two battles raged on, each a maelstrom of violence and chaos. The Jinchuriki lunged at Raven, his fist cloaked in a searing layer of crimson chakra. But Raven easily dodged the attack. Both Itachi and Naruto's attacks, whether they were taijutsu strikes, torrents of ninjutsu, or attempts at jinjutsu, were utterly ineffective, unable to penetrate the thick, protective chakra shroud. Weasel, seeing an opening, activated his Mangekyo Sharingan and unleashed a torrent of black flames. Amaterasu, he called out. The black flames consumed the Jinchuriki's cloak, but the Biju's chakra was so potent that the affected parts simply peeled off and reformed, shedding the inextinguishable fire. Seeing the Amaterasu fail, Raven clasped his hands together in a series of quick seals. Wooden vines erupted from the ground, twisting and coiling with a raw, primal force. They shot forward, wrapping around the Jinchuriki with incredible speed and strength. Would release, Hokage style, Raven declared. The vines tightened, a chakra-absorbing technique that began to suppress the Biju's wild energy, forcing the Jinchuriki's chakra cloak to recede. With the Jinchuriki now vulnerable, Weasel moved in a flash, delivering a precise and powerful blow to the back of his neck. The Jinchuriki's eyes rolled back in his head, and his body went limp, falling to the ground unconscious. Meanwhile, the battle between Owl, Leo, and the unidentified missing Neen raged on. The rogue ninja from IWA was far stronger than they had anticipated. A master of close-quarters combat, the enemy moved with blinding speed, forcing Owl to constantly defend herself, her kunai and shuriken barely enough to deflect the barrage of strikes. The missing Neen feinted with a kick, then twisted, delivering a swift, targeted strike toward Owl's head. The blow was too fast, too powerful, and for a terrifying moment, Owl knew she couldn't block it. Just as the fatal strike was about to land, a jagged wall of ice erupted from the ground between them. The missing Nin's fist slammed into the solid ice, the impact creating a spiderweb of cracks, but failing to break through. Leo had moved in front of her teammate. Using the momentum from her defense, Leo moved with swift, fluid motions. A dome of polished ice mirrors shimmered into existence around the missing Nin, trapping them inside her demonic mirror of ice. The rogue ninja, confused and disoriented, was now at her mercy. Without hesitation, Leo began raining down a barrage of razor-sharp ice needles from every mirror, the needles glinting with lethal precision as they filled the confined space. Al stayed back, her Sharingan spinning as she observed the attack. She was ready to intervene at a moment's notice, but for now, she trusted her teammates' skill and the overwhelming power of her technique. The chaos of battle gave way to an eerie silence. The team regathered at the edge of the clearing, their forms emerging from the shadows of the surrounding forest. The air was cold, scented with the unique chill of Leo's ice mirrors and the faint lingering smell of burnt ozone. Weasel and Raven were the first to reconvene, their movements precise and controlled as they scanned the area. A short time later, Leo and Al arrived. The missing Nin was nowhere to be seen, now contained within Leo's jutsu. "Report," Weasel said, his voice flat and calm. Al and Leo gave their report in tandem. "Target neutralized, trapped and contained within the demonic ice mirrors. Ready for extraction," Al stated. "The Jinchuriki has also been neutralized. We can now proceed with the mission's second phase," Weasel said, his eyes meeting each of his teammates in turn. With a nod, the squad turned and began their silent journey back, leaving the frozen clearing behind. Al raised a hand. "Sensei, what should we do with the Jinchuriki?" she asked. "If we kill him, the Four Tails will die too," Leo pointed out, her expression grim. "We can extract the Four Tails and store it," Raven said, his voice calm and certain. "We can?" Weasel asked, a rare flicker of surprise crossing his face. "It's an ancient Uzumaki sealing technique that stores the item in a pocket dimension," Raven explained. "It's similar to the summoning jutsu." "We'll decide what to do next," Weasel said, his voice decisive. "For now, let's store the Four Tails." Raven nodded in silent agreement and began the preparations for the sealing. He placed the unconscious Jinchuriki on the cold, flat ground, which he swiftly transformed into a makeshift altar. Using his chakra, he inscribed a series of intricate concentric rings, each one filled with precise, glowing kanji. As the final ring was completed, he channeled a new surge of energy. A three-layer, crimson barrier erupted into existence, encircling the altar. The barrier pulsed with raw power, a clear sign of its immense strength and its purpose, to contain any sudden surge of chakra during the sealing process. Everything was now in place. The sealing jutsu began. The kanji within the concentric rings glowed with an eerie, otherworldly light, and the air around the altar began to shimmer. With a final, focused surge of Raven's chakra, a tear appeared in the fabric of space itself, a small, dark rift that seemed to swallow the light around it. A powerful, unseen force emanated from the tear, and the immense Bijou chakra began to pull from the Jinchuriki's body. The crimson energy that had once cloaked him now funneled into a single, swirling vortex, draining away with a soundless roar. It was a torrent of raw power being pulled from a physical vessel and consumed by the void. The Jinchuriki's body went limp, his skin returning to its normal color as the last vestiges of the tailed beast's chakra were pulled into the pocket dimension. The tears shimmered one last time before sealing shut, leaving a perfect silence in its wake. Weasel's A&BU squad returned to the hidden leaf village under the cloak of night. They moved silently, slipping past the village guards and making their way directly to the Hokage's office. Despite the late hour, the fourth Hokage, Minato Namikaze, was waiting. He sat behind his desk, his expression a mix of relief and gravity. As the squad stood at attention, Weasel stepped forward and gave a concise, professional report of the mission. He detailed the neutralization of both missing Nin and the Four Tails Jinchuriki. Minato asked, his voice low. "He has been neutralized, sir," Raven said, stepping forward. He presented a small, intricately sealed scroll. "His tailed beast has been extracted and stored using the Uzumaki tailed beast sealing jutsu." Minato's eyes widened, a flicker of genuine astonishment on his face. He took the scroll and held it carefully, his mind racing to process the implications. This is one of the Uzumaki's most difficult sealing techniques, he murmured, more to himself than to the squad. I never thought I'd see anyone able to perform it. He looked up at Raven, a new mix of respect and awe in his eyes. The successful neutralization of the targets was a victory, but the unprecedented ability to perform such a seal was a monumental shift in the balance of power. He now had a greater understanding of his son's true potential. After the mission report was done, Weasel and Owl took their leave, heading to their respective homes. As they left, Leo and Raven made their way to the Namikaze household. The quiet comfort of their home was a stark contrast to the tense, adrenaline-fueled atmosphere of the mission. They settled down in the living room, a silent understanding passing between them. The weight of the mission, the lives taken, and the power displayed hung in the air. Roughly half an hour later, the front door opened, and Minato arrived. His face, still etched with the gravity of the Hokage's office, softened slightly as he saw Naruto and Yuki. The mission had ended, but for him, the most difficult conversation was about to begin. At the dinner table in the Namikaze household, the atmosphere was buzzing with excitement. Minma and Mito were practically vibrating in their seats, their usual sibling rivalry replaced with a shared, boundless energy. Jiraiya-sensei said he's going to personally train us, Minma exclaimed, his voice loud enough to make the dishes rattle. And he's going to teach us Sage Mode, Mito added, her eyes wide with unbridled joy. Across the table, Naruto and Yuki sat quietly, the contrast between their subdued mood and their siblings' exuberance a stark reminder of the mission they had just returned from. Naruto, in particular, was lost in thought, the events of the last few days weighing on him. That pervert better not teach my children anything inappropriate, Kushina said, a dangerous glint in her eyes. It might be too late for that, Minato replied with a wry smile. What became of the four tails? Naruto asked, his voice low. Minato's expression grew serious. Keeping it will cause unwanted tension between IWA and Konoha, he replied. We're thinking of returning it and using it as leverage to get into a mutual non-aggression treaty. Yuki nodded absent-mindedly. Yuki sat quietly beside Naruto, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The dinner table conversation swirled around her, but she heard none of it. She was reliving the mission, the moment when she had trapped the missing Nin within her demonic mirror of ice. The memory of the figure, caught and helpless, as her ice needles had rained down, was burned into her mind. It was the first time she had ever taken a life. Until now, her missions had been about scouting or defense, but this was different. She had not only killed, she had done it with a jutsu of such beauty and elegance. The contrast was horrifying. She felt a coldness deep within her, a chill that had nothing to do with her ice release, but everything to do with the life she had just extinguished. She was a ninja, but the reality of what that meant had just become terrifyingly clear. Naruto gently took Yuki's hand and led her to his room, shutting the door quietly behind them. The door to Naruto's room clicked shut, muffling the sounds of the lively dinner downstairs. The quiet was a relief, a safe haven from the noise and the prying eyes of their family. Naruto sat on the edge of his bed and gently took Yuki's hands in his. I guess it's time, he said softly, his voice full of understanding. He looked at her, his expression free of judgment, only concern. Tell me, he asked. Yuki's hands trembled in his. She looked down, unable to meet his gaze. It was different, she began, her voice a fragile whisper. I know we're ninjas, but he was a person. He was just a person. Am I a monster? Yuki asked, her voice cracking. Naruto squeezed her hands. No. Or perhaps, I don't have the answer to that, he said, his gaze uncertain. Tears welled in Yuki's eyes. Do you still love me? She asked. Yes, I do, and I will continue to do so until my last breath, Naruto replied. The tears that had been threatening to fall finally broke free. Yuki's face crumpled, and she leaned into Naruto, burying her face in his chest as she broke down completely. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her tightly as she sobbed, the full weight of the mission and her actions finally crashing down on her. Naruto held her, stroking her hair in a silent promise of comfort, a steadfast pillar against the storm of her grief. Naruto held Yuki until her sobs softened into quiet shudders. The only sound in the room was their breathing, the shared silence a comfort he didn't need to speak to fill. He gently pulled her back, holding her at arm's length so he could look into her tear-streaked face. His voice was a soft, steady murmur. "If you don't want to be a ninja, then no one would blame you for that." "But it's our first mission of ENBU," Yuki replied, her voice shaky. "I can't quit." "It doesn't matter," Naruto said, his gaze unwavering. "You don't have to be a ninja or anything ENBU if you don't want to. No one would hold it against you." The next 2 years passed in a blur. As the seasons turned and missions came and went, Yuki made a decision that would change her life forever. Following Naruto's heartfelt words, she retired from ANBU, leaving the bloodshed and moral ambiguity behind to find her own path. During this time, Naruto's latent potential, sparked by the Hashirama cells and the unknown Senjutsu chakra, reached its natural conclusion. He awakened the legendary Rinnegan. With this new and unimaginable power, he solidified his place not only as a prodigy, but as the strongest ninja of the modern era. In the 2 years since Mito and Minma had left for their training with Jiraiya, a quiet sort of emptiness had settled over the Namikaze household. The laughter was less frequent, the house felt larger, and Kushina often found herself lost in thought, a loneliness settling over her that she tried to hide. It was Yuki who filled that void. With Naruto often busy with his own intensive training, Yuki spent her days with Kushina. They would cook together, their hands a flurry of motion as they prepared meals for the family. They'd tend to the garden, sharing stories and quiet jokes amidst the blossoms. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch, a silent companionship between them that was a powerful comfort to Kushina. Yuki's presence was a steady, warm balm to Kushina's heart. She never tried to replace her children, but simply to be there, a quiet, unwavering pillar of support. Through Yuki, Kushina found a new kind of friendship, and in their shared moments, the loneliness left behind by the departure of Mito and Minma finally began to fade. The atmosphere in the Hokage's private strategy room was heavy with tension. Gathered around a large map of the elemental nations were some of Konoha's most elite ninja, a small but formidable group assembled for a task of utmost importance. Among them were Naruto, Kakashi, and Itachi. Jiraiya stood at the head of the table, his usual carefree demeanor replaced by a grim seriousness. "A new rogue group has emerged from the shadows," he began, his voice low and firm. "They call themselves the Akatsuki, and their objective is clear. They're hunting Jinchuriki." He looked directly at the three ninja in front of him. "This is an S-rank mission. You three, along with other heavy hitters, are the core of our anti-Akatsuki squad. Under my direct command, your job is to investigate this new threat and stop them at all costs." Naruto's eyes, now a vibrant violet from his Rinnegan, showed a resolve that matched Jiraiya's. The easy peace he had enjoyed for the last 2 years was over. The time for the strongest ninja of the modern era to act had begun. The Namikaze household was buzzing with a joyful energy that had been absent for the last 2 years. Kushina, in particular, was radiant, a wide smile fixed on her face as she and Yuki moved through the kitchen, a whirlwind of activity. They worked together in perfect synchrony, dusting shelves and humming to a tune only Kushina could hear. The chores, usually a simple routine, felt like a festive preparation. A massive feast was already being prepared, the air rich with the scent of spices and sizzling meat. "I can't believe it's been 2 years, Kushina said, her voice filled with a mixture of excitement and disbelief. "It feels like just yesterday they were little. I can't wait to see how much they've grown." Yuki smiled, her own heart full. She watched Kushina move with a lightness she hadn't seen since Mito and Minma's departure, a testament to how deeply she had missed them. The quiet loneliness that had once settled over the house had completely vanished, replaced by the warm, buzzing anticipation of a family reunion. Naruto stood outside the Namikaze household, his hands in his pockets as he watched the sunset. The cheerful commotion from inside, the happy sounds of Kushina and Yuki preparing for the reunion, reached him only as a distant murmur. He preferred it that way. In the past 2 years, he had spent most of his time on missions, coming home only for brief, necessary intervals. He had opened up to Kushina and Minato, sharing parts of his past and his true feelings, but he was still distant. The emotional chasm wasn't something a few conversations could bridge. He cared for them, deeply, but in his mind, they were not family. They were simply close friends. The journey through ANBU had been a very dark one, filling him with a coldness that made it difficult to feel at home. Now, as the news of the Akatsuki hunting the Jinchuriki settled in his mind, that coldness began to stir. He could feel something waking within him, a dark and powerful resolve born from his painful past, and he knew it was a journey he had to face alone. Naruto slipped back into the quiet of his home, retreating to the sanctuary of his room. Yuki followed him, closing the door silently behind them, her expression filled with a gentle concern. She moved towards him, a presence of steady comfort, and with a soft, knowing gesture, she nudged him onto the bed and climbed on top of him. "So," she said, her eyes meeting his purple Rinnegan. "How's everything going?" "As usual," Naruto said, his voice flat. Yuki's brow furrowed into a frown. "Since when did you start lying to me?" she asked, her voice soft but firm. "I'm not lying," Naruto replied. "Then tell me how you're feeling," she insisted. Naruto's gaze dropped. He hesitated for a moment, the weight of his recent past showing on his face. "Unsure," he finally said. Yuki sighed and gently poked his forehead. Naruto's eyes widened slightly in surprise. "What was that for?" he asked. She didn't answer with words. Instead, she leaned in and kissed him, a long, tender kiss meant to convey everything he couldn't put into words. When she pulled back, she looked at him, her eyes soft with emotion. "Do you understand now?" she whispered. "Yeah, I guess," Naruto said, a soft smile finally touching his lips. In one swift, smooth motion, he flipped them, gently pinning her to the bed as he lowered himself to kiss her again. A few hours later, the joyous chaos Kushina had been anticipating erupted. The front door swung open, and Jiraiya stepped inside, a wide grin on his face. Behind him stood Mito and Minma, their faces tired but their eyes shining with a mixture of exhaustion and homecoming relief. Kushina made a huge fuss, her excitement like an ocean at high tide. With a cry of delight, she enveloped both of her children in a powerful hug, pulling them into the house before they could even get their shoes off. "Oh, my babies. Look how you've grown. Are you eating enough? Are you sleeping? Did that pervert teach you anything bad? You didn't do anything stupid, right?" she fired off, her questions coming so fast they were a single, unstoppable wave. Mito and Minma, equally excited, tried to keep up, their own voices a jumble of answers as they were swept along in the tide of their mother's affection. But even in their overwhelming joy, another thought was on their minds. They had heard Jiraiya talk about it, but they wanted to see it for themselves. They stole glances over their mother's shoulder, their eyes searching for Naruto and his legendary Rinnegan. After some time, the initial whirlwind of the reunion finally settled. The family gathered around the dinner table, a rarity in itself, made all the more so by the presence of both Minato, who had come home early, and Naruto, who was sitting at the table alongside Yuki. It was an unusual sight, given Naruto's tendency to stay out late and his general emotional distance from the family. As Naruto finally came face to face with Mito and Minma, their chatter died. Their eyes fixed on his, and their breath caught in their throats. They stared at his purple Rinnegan with its concentric circles, a power they had only heard about in hushed tones from Jiraiya. In that moment, words were useless. They could feel the immense power radiating from him, a force that was calm and steady, yet profound and overwhelming. It was a power that far exceeded anything they had ever felt before, a force that made the immense chakra of the nine tails they both carried feel like a flickering candle in comparison. The silent awe that had fallen over the table was quickly shattered. Mito and Minma, their curiosity overwhelming, began to fire questions at Naruto, a rapid-fire volley of inquiries about his new eyes. "What is that? What can you do? Is it really stronger than Kurama's chakra?" Minma asked, his voice a breathless rush. Naruto remained calm, his expression serene as he held up a hand to slow them down. "It's called the Rinnegan," he explained. "It grants me control over the six paths." He began to calmly explain their abilities, each description a testament to the immense power he wielded. He spoke of the Deva Path's ability to manipulate gravitational forces, the Azura Path that allows for mechanical body enhancements, and the human path that lets him read minds. He went on to describe the animal path's power to summon creatures, the Preta path that absorbs chakra, and the Naraka path that can summon the king of hell. And besides that, he continued, there are other abilities. It allows me to see the flow of chakra, master all 5 nature transformations, and even grants some space-time ninjutsu. Mito and Minma listened in stunned silence, their initial excitement replaced by a profound sense of awe. They had seen him as a prodigy, but now they saw him as something else entirely. You know, I knew a guy named Nagato, Jiraiya said, his voice thoughtful. He, too, had the Rinnegan. Madara's Rinnegan, Naruto thought to himself, his mind piecing together the information. So where is he now? Naruto asked. A shadow of guilt and sadness passed over Jiraiya's face. He died during the civil war in the Hidden Rain. Minato silently put a comforting hand on his former teacher's shoulder. Well, what else did you learn? Kushina asked Mito, trying to change the subject and bring the mood back up. We learned Sage Mode. We can draw the Nine-Tails chakra, and we can even use our sealing chains, just as you do, Mito said, a proud smile on her face. We even completed the Rasengan, Minma added, his chest puffing out. Kushina clapped her hands together, her face glowing with pride. That's my children. That's just wonderful, she exclaimed, her eyes welling up with happy tears. Minato, too, smiled broadly. He looked at his 2 children, their chests puffed out with pride, and felt a deep sense of relief. It was a weight off his shoulders knowing his children were now so capable. Minato, too, smiled broadly. You've done us proud, he said, his voice full of warmth. Jiraiya let out a hearty laugh, raising his sake cup. Of course they did. They're my students, after all, he said with a wink. Yuki gave a soft, genuine smile. You both have grown so strong. It's amazing to see. Mito and Minma turned to Naruto, a silent question in their eyes. They had listed their accomplishments, but his opinion was the one that truly mattered to them. Naruto's expression remained serene, but a small, genuine smile touched his lips. You've worked hard, he said, his voice calm and clear. You have surpassed my expectations. His simple words held a weight that far exceeded any praise. It was a silent acknowledgement, a sign of respect from someone who understood the meaning of true strength. The twins grinned, a feeling of validation washing over them. With the tension and questions finally put to rest, the family sat and enjoyed their meal, the table filled with the kind of joy and warmth that only a family reunion could bring. A few days later, a sense of foreboding settled over the hidden leaf. It was a normal afternoon when a frantic messenger ninja arrived at the Hokage's office, his body covered in sand and his face pale with exhaustion. He carried a single, urgent message for Minato. Minato's expression hardened as he read the scroll. The Akatsuki had made their move. The message was from the Sand Village. The One-Tails Jinchuriki, the young 5th Kazekage, had been kidnapped. Without a moment's hesitation, Minato's voice cut through the silence. Send an emergency message to Naruto. He, along with Kakashi and Team 11, are to leave immediately. Their mission is to rescue the Kazekage. The team was assembled within minutes, their faces grim. The domestic calm of the last few days was over. The game had begun, and their first move was to intercept a powerful enemy who had already struck. Team 11, consisting of Mito, Minma, and a young kunoichi named Yakumo, traveled at a relentless pace toward the Land of Wind. In front of them, Kakashi set a blistering speed, his form cutting through the desolate landscape. Behind the team, Naruto followed, his presence a powerful, silent anchor. A raging sandstorm forced them to take a brief stop, the wind and grit a blinding, suffocating wall. But they didn't waste any time, waiting out the worst of it before resuming their journey with a renewed sense of urgency. After 2 grueling days of travel, they finally arrived at the gates of the hidden sand village, known as Tsuna. After a hurried briefing from the Tsuna Council, Team Kakashi was filled in on the details of the kidnapping. Without a moment's delay, they headed to Gaara's last known location, racing across the desert at a breakneck pace. The team's advance across the desert was halted by 2 cloaked figures. One was Kisame, his shark-like features twisting into a predatory grin as he unsheathed the monstrous blade, Samahata. The other was a shinobi from the waterfall village, his body rippling with condensed chakra. Naruto stepped forward, his purple Rinnegan already active. Kisame lunged first, a torrent of water-style jutsu erupting from his mouth. Naruto deflected the initial wave with a subtle gesture, using the Preta path to absorb the incoming chakra. Kisame grinned wider, seeing this as a challenge. He charged, his blade poised to slice through Naruto, but Naruto's movements were inhumanly fast. He met Samahata with a single, chakra-infused kunai, the clash sending a shockwave through the sand. The battle became a chaotic dance of water-style jutsu and Naruto's counterattacks, each one more powerful than the last. Finally, as Kisame prepared a massive shark bomb, Naruto saw his opening. He channeled his chakra, and a blinding bolt of lightning release erupted from his hand, striking Kisame with pinpoint precision. The legendary swordsman fell, his body twitching from the raw power. Meanwhile, Kakashi and Yakumo faced the other S-rank shinobi, a master of earth style. He slammed his hands together, and a massive earthen golem rose from the sand, charging toward them. Kakashi's Sharingan spun, analyzing the golem's composition and the shinobi's chakra network. Yakumo blind him. "I'll go for the core," he commanded. Yakumo nodded, instantly weaving a sign. A powerful genjutsu took hold, plunging the shinobi's world into a disorienting haze. The golem's movements faltered, giving Kakashi the opening he needed. He shot forward, a Chidori crackling in his hand, and bypassed the golem's defenses to strike the missing ninja's chest directly. The shinobi collapsed, defeated, revealing a clone, a distraction to buy time. With the path cleared, the team didn't waste another second. Mito and Minma focused, their sensory range extending far out into the desert. "He's in a cave? Just ahead," Minma yelled. The team sprinted forward, their mission now in its final, critical stage. They arrived at the entrance of a massive cave, ready to confront the final threat. The rescue mission turned instantly grim. Without hesitation, Naruto channeled his formidable power and unleashed a concentrated Shinra Tensei, Almighty Push. The cave entrance buckled and then disintegrated in a flash of raw force, clearing the way for the team. Inside, the sight was horrifying. Gaara's corpse lay slumped against the wall, his life already extinguished. Standing over him were two Akatsuki members, Sasori and Deidara. The team reacted instantly. Kakashi, Yakumo, Mito, and Minma moved to corner Sasori, forcing the puppet master to defend himself. But Deidara, quicker still, scooped up Gaara's body and mounted a giant clay bird, rocketing out of a hole in the cave ceiling. Naruto pivoted and gave chase, focused solely on retrieving the Kazekage. Deidara tried to put distance between them, but Naruto's Rinnegan was faster. He locked onto the fleeing villain and used Universal Pull, Bansho Tenin, yanking Deidara and his clay bird violently back to the ground. The impact sent a shockwave across the desert floor. As soon as Deidara hit the sand, he lashed out in a desperate counter, launching his volatile clay creations directly at Naruto. The clay exploded on contact, creating a blinding, massive mushroom dust cloud. Naruto braced himself, instantly attempting to repel the blast, but the fatal flaw of the technique became apparent. Almighty Push had a 5-second cooldown. He was too late. The dust cloud began to clear, revealing a devastating impact. The center was a massive, charred slug. Her skin already begun to heal, its body smoking from the blast. A moment later, Naruto emerged unscathed from the dead snake's mouth, his eyes narrowed, his pursuit of Deidara renewed. Inside the cavern, the air was thick with the dust of Naruto's entry. With no time to waste, Mito rushed toward the remaining threat, Sasori. She executed the Shadow Clone Jutsu, creating a handful of decoys to divert the Akatsuki members' attention. Using the brief distraction, the real Mito closed the distance and slammed a spiraling Rasengan into Sasori's torso, the sheer force shattering the puppet shell he wore. The wreckage collapsed, and a red-haired figure, the true Sasori, leapt out. A smirk crossed his face as he unsealed his ultimate weapon. Red's secret technique. Performance of 100 puppets. Dozens of scrolls erupted into the air, disgorging a terrifying army of lethal puppets that immediately swarmed the space. The entire cave plunged into a chaotic battle. Yakumo was instantly at a disadvantage. Her powerful genjutsu was useless against opponents without a functioning nervous system. She was forced to rely on her physical prowess and secondary jutsu to defend herself. Kakashi immediately singled out the greatest danger, the puppet of the third Kazekage, legendary for its iron sand abilities. Kakashi focused his Sharingan, engaging in a deadly, close-range duel against the puppet's unique magnetic release. Meanwhile, Mito and Minma were overwhelmed by the sheer numbers of the 100 puppets. They quickly summoned their own large contingents of shadow clones to match Sasori's army, turning the cavern floor into a whirlwind of clashing metal, exploding chakra, and sheer exhaustion. The battle for Gaara's body had become a fight for their lives. Sasori's defeat, Kakashi found himself in deep trouble. His decision to close the distance against the third Kazekage puppet proved to be a critical error. Though his lightning release helped neutralize the puppet's devastating magnetic release and iron sand, he was hit by a poison needle. He felt the venom affecting him badly, but his mind remained sharp enough to make a quick assessment. Yakumo was safe at a distance, and Mito and Minma had Kurama's healing factor. He was on his own. With a final, desperate surge of chakra, he activated his Mangekyo Sharingan and sniped the upper half of the third Kazekage puppet, shattering it and removing the immediate threat. Meanwhile, Mito and Minma stayed at a safe distance, sending waves of shadow clones to slowly reduce the overwhelming army of 100 puppets while simultaneously protecting the incapacitated Kakashi and the vulnerable Yakumo. Suddenly, Mito's eyes widened with a crucial realization. No puppet can generate chakra. He must have something inside him. Minma nodded grimly. Even if you destroy his body, he takes over another one. Mito didn't hesitate. Buy me some time. I'll enter Sage mode. Minma instantly complied, focusing solely on destroying as many of the remaining puppets as possible to give his sister the space she needed. As Minma battled with fierce concentration, Mito successfully entered the enhanced state of Sage mode. With the help of 3 of her shadow clones, she quickly formed a massive, humming sphere, a wind-style Rasen Shuriken. With a roar, she launched the destructive jutsu at Sasori. The sheer force of the attack was absolute. The swirling, razor-sharp winds ripped through the remaining puppets, causing them to instantly disintegrate along with Sasori himself. The catastrophic force of the jutsu didn't stop there. The sheer concussive power caused the foundation of the subterranean lair to give way, and the entire cave began to collapse. In an instant, Minma transformed. A pulsating, vibrant shroud of crimson energy surrounded him as he entered KSM 1, QB Chakra Mode 1. He manifested a massive chakra arm, a giant hand of pure power, which he used to grab and shield Yakumo, Kakashi, and Mito, guiding them out safely just as tons of rock and debris crashed down behind them. Naruto immediately closed the distance from the landing site, engaging Deidara in a high-speed chase across the desert. Deidara kept his distance, constantly creating small exploding clay birds and flinging them at his pursuer. They were useless against Naruto, who could simply deflect them with a precisely controlled wind jutsu. Naruto could have ended the fight instantly, but he was holding back, waiting for the right moment to use the human path to extract intelligence. Deidara, frustrated by the futility of his attacks, erupted in a shout. "Art is an explosion, you moron," Naruto replied, without raising his voice. "Art is an eternity spent in a second, and a second spent in eternity." Deidara's flight path wavered. He paused, momentarily forgetting they were enemies. "What doesn't that mean?" he asked, genuinely confused. "What I mean is," Naruto started, his purple Rinnegan locking onto his target. "Art is a passion that burns for an eternity in a single second, and it's a desire of eternity expressed in a second." He paused, a smirk touching his lips. "And you are a moron for not understanding that." Deidara looked offended, but his mind, racing to find a counter-argument to the baffling statement, failed him. "Universal pull," Naruto commanded. Deidara was snatched out of the sky and slammed into Naruto, who immediately gripped his throat. "You cheated. I wasn't ready." Deidara sputtered. "Not my fault," Naruto said, his eyes glowing with an ominous light. He then activated the human path, reaching into Daidara's consciousness and swiftly ripping his soul from his body, gaining all of the Akatsuki members' knowledge and memories in a silent, violent flash. With the Akatsuki members Sasori and Deidara defeated, the mission to retrieve the Kazekage was technically complete, though the cost was high. Gaara's dead body was quickly transported back to the Tsuna, where the revered elder Lady Chiyo performed a forbidden, selfless act. Using a powerful transfer technique, she exchanged her own life force to bring the young Kazekage back from the dead. The entire village was plunged into a sorrowful wake, mourning the sacrifice of one of their most beloved leaders, even as they celebrated the miraculous return of Gaara. The Hokages report weary but resolute. Naruto, Kakashi, and Team 11, Mito, Minma, and Yakumo, returned to the Hidden Leaf Village. They immediately gathered in the Hokage's office to deliver their report to Minato Namikaze. The report was a tapestry of victory and grim consequence. They detailed the chaotic battle in the desert, the destruction of Sasori and Deidara, the near-fatal poisoning of Kakashi, and the decisive, powerful actions of the twins in destroying the 100 puppets. Naruto then delivered the most critical information, relaying the memory and knowledge he had extracted from Deidara's soul using the human path. He explained the Akatsuki's true objective, the systematic hunting of all Jinchuriki, and the tactical knowledge of their current team locations and next targets. Minato listened, his expression growing steadily darker with each revelation. The mission was a success, but the war against the Akatsuki had just escalated. Konoha had lost no one, but the intelligence gained had confirmed the true scale of the global threat. Armed with the vital intelligence Naruto extracted from Deidara, Minato and Jiraiya immediately finalized the village's counter-strategy. The anti-Akatsuki squad was formally structured, and a coordinated triple strike was initiated to hit the enemy before they could regroup. Mission 1. The Fire Temple Team 10, Ino, Shikamaru, and Choji, and Team 11, Mito, Minma, and Yakumo, were dispatched together. Their target: the immortal duo of Haiden and Kakuzu, last sighted near the Fire Temple in the Land of Fire. Mission 2. The Coast. The veteran squads of Team 7 and Team 9 were sent to intercept a newly formed pairing, Kisame and Mangetsu, the second of the 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist, who were likely moving to capture the 6 or 3 tails. Mission 3. Hidden Rain. Meanwhile, Jiraiya and Naruto left Konoha on the most dangerous mission of all, a direct infiltration of the Hidden Rain village to confront the leader of the Akatsuki, Pain. Journey to the Fire Temple. On the path toward the Fire Temple, the combined forces of Team 10 and Team 11 moved with focused speed. Asuma and Kakashi led the way, their gait steady and their silence heavy with the contemplation of battle strategy. Behind them, the younger ninja groups moved with distinct energies. Yakumo, Ino, and Mito walked side by side, their voices bubbling with excited chatter. They had not been able to meet like this for a long time, and the gravity of the mission was temporarily set aside for the sheer joy of catching up. Did you hear about the new dango shop by the gate? We absolutely have to go when we get back, Ino exclaimed, her voice bright. We will, Yakumo replied with a laugh, while Mito detailed a bizarre story from her training in the mountains. Their excitement was a sharp contrast to the group trailing them. Minma, Shikamaru, and Choji kept their conversation low and efficient. We should assume Haiden is a frontal attacker and Kakuzu is the heavy armor, Shikamaru observed, already tracing potential strategies on his palm. My chakra will handle the big hits, Minma confirmed, his voice less enthusiastic and more analytical. Less talking, more walking, Choji chimed in, though he too was focused, crunching on his chips with unusual concentration. The contrast in their chatter highlighted the different pressures each group felt, but all were moving toward the same, inevitable confrontation. Upon reaching the Fire Temple, the combined forces of Team 10 and Team 11 were immediately greeted by the resident monks. Asuma quickly sought out the temple's leader, his former comrade from the 12 Guardian Shinobi. He explained the grave situation, that 2 high-priority Akatsuki targets were heading their way, and the temple, sadly, would have to serve as the battleground. The leader, understanding the gravity of the threat, offered his sanctuary and full cooperation. The shinobi teams settled in, the serene atmosphere of the temple a stark contrast to the deadly confrontation they were waiting for. While Kakashi and Asuma discussed deployment, the junior members relied on the most reliable mind among them. Shikamaru set up his planning station, his face a picture of intense focus. He knew their targets were unlike any they had faced. Haiden was functionally immortal, and Kakuzu had multiple hearts, granting him near-limitless endurance. Simple ninjutsu wouldn't work. After hours of deliberation, Shikamaru presented his chillingly simple plan to his senseis. The strategy required extreme precision and teamwork. Neutralize Haiden. They would have to find a way to chop off Haiden's head. This wouldn't kill him, but it would immobilize his body, taking him out of the fight and preventing his dangerous ritual. Annihilate Kakuzu. They needed an attack capable of destroying all 5 of his hearts simultaneously and bypassing his durable bodies. The only viable weapon was the Rasen Shuriken, a technique that disintegrated its target on a cellular level. The final piece of the plan was laid bare. Team 11 would focus on engaging Haiden, while Shikamaru would set up the trap for Kakuzu. The stage was set, and all that remained was the arrival of the Akatsuki. A few tense hours later, the air within the fire temple suddenly grew cold and sinister. Haiden and Kakuzu stepped into the courtyard, their cloaks fluttering as they surveyed the empty space. It was the moment the teams had been waiting for. Immediately, Shikamaru sprung the first trap, his shadow snaking out across the ground. Before Haiden could react, he was immobilized by the shadow possession jutsu. Kakuzu, sensing the danger, reacted instantly, leaping back and narrowly dodging Shikamaru's extending shadow. But Shikamaru was relentless, maintaining pressure as Ino darted forward, her resolve absolute. She jumped between the combatants and executed the mind possession jutsu. Her consciousness seized control of Kakuzu, forcing the body-snatching immortal to stumble. Ino twisted his body, making him step directly into the next phase of the trap. In that moment, Mito stood ready. Cloaked in the potent energy of Sage Mode, she hurled the deadly wind-style Rasen Shuriken with devastating precision. The colossal, chakra-laced projectile tore through the air and impacted Kakuzu. Simultaneously, Kakashi, acting as the mission's anchor, executed a sealing jutsu around the blast radius, minimizing the earth-shattering damage the attack would have inflicted on the surrounding temple. The team didn't give Haiden a moment to recover. Choji used his partial expansion jutsu, inflating his arms to massive size and wrapping them around Haiden, crushing him into complete immobility. Asuma moved with the swift certainty of a true sensei, whipping out his chakra-infused trench knives and cleanly slicing off Haiden's head. Before the severed parts could so much as twitch, Minma stepped in, deploying a specialized sealing jutsu to secure Haiden's head and body into separate scrolls. The silence that followed was absolute. Both targets had been neutralized with flawless execution, a testament to Shikamaru's genius and the raw power and teamwork of Team 10 and Team 11. The heavy air of battle lifted as Yakumo released the immense Jinjutsu she had sustained over the fire temple. The familiar contours of the courtyard snapped back into sharp focus, revealing the hidden monks emerging from behind pillars, clutching various weapons, their faces etched with relief and shock at the damage the brief, powerful battle had caused. A collective sigh of relief passed over the shinobi. The victory was total. They immediately began congratulating each other, their professional respect blossoming into genuine camaraderie. Minmo walked over to the strategists, his tone filled with admiration. That was flawless, Ino Shikamaru. We couldn't have pulled that off without your planning. Kakashi gave his students a rare, genuine smile. Excellent work, all of you. Minma, your sealing was critical. Yakumo, the Jinjutsu bought us all the time we needed. And Mito, the Rasen Shuriken was a decisive, perfect strike. Asuma clasped his hands proudly on the shoulders of his own team. Choji, your immobilization was precise. Ino, your timing and courage were the key to getting Kakuzu in position. And Shikamaru, you are a genius. The plan worked perfectly. The two victorious teams stood together, the quiet weight of their success settling over them. The Akatsuki threat was real, but now, so was the strength of the new generation of Konoha shinobi. Meanwhile at Hidden Rain, after a long, strenuous journey, Jiraiya and Naruto finally reached the Hidden Rain village. The environment was grim. A relentless downpour shrouded the towering metal structures, creating an atmosphere of perpetual gloom and oppression. They moved with the utmost stealth, quickly capturing a few ranged shinobi on the outskirts of the village. Without hesitation, Naruto activated his Rinnegan and used the human path, reaching into their minds to rip out the intelligence they needed about Pain's movements. The brutal, necessary act was swift and silent. So, are you going to say something? Naruto finally prompted, his voice quiet. Jiraiya stared at the condensation trickling down a pipe. I don't know. I guess it's my fault. I shouldn't have left them, he admitted, the words heavy with decades of regret. They were just kids. Yahiko was always the idealistic voice, the leader, and Nagato was the quiet guardian, while Conan held them all together. I never thought they'd end up like this. If you don't want to, Naruto said, his gaze steady, then I can take on the mission by myself. No, Jiraiya said, his posture straightening. The guilt was still there, but it was now overshadowed by a fierce resolve. It's something I must do. Naruto nodded, a look of understanding passing between master and student. They didn't need any more words. The two turned and began to make their way deeper into the oppressive, metallic heart of the Hidden Rain village, ready to confront Pain. The moment of confrontation arrived, a grim reunion between Jiraiya, his student Naruto, and the figures of Pain and Conan. The oppressive reign of the village seemed to magnify the tension in the air. Naruto's intimate knowledge of the Rinnegan's abilities gave him an immediate tactical advantage, but his movements were cautious. He held back his full power, unwilling to risk accidentally injuring Jiraiya or Conan in the close quarters. Instead, he chose a swift, decisive move. He utilized a teleportation jutsu to appear instantly behind Conan. Before she could react, he slammed his palm into her, activating the Preta path. The sudden, violent drainage of her chakra forced her paper transformation to cease, leaving her in her human form. Naruto instantly secured her, holding her hostage. His voice, usually warm, was cold and commanding as he addressed the immobile figure of Pain. Take us to your real body, or Conan dies. Conan struggled against his grip, but Pain's single visible eye remained focused on Naruto. After a moment of chilling silence, he agreed, and the world warped around them as they were transported to a hidden chamber. The room was dimly lit, revealing the frail, emaciated body of Nagato, connected to an array of chakra receivers. His legs were useless, and his skin was stretched tight over his bone. Jiraiya's eyes widened in horror. Nagato, what the hell happened to you? He choked out. The world happened to me, Nagato replied, his voice thin but ringing with conviction. Why are you doing this? Jiraiya pleaded. Nagato's gaze, enhanced by the purple Rinnegan, was fixed on his former teacher. Because it's the only way. Humans have been waging war for years. We are all but men, acting on our vengeance, calling it justice. But when vengeance becomes justice, a vicious cycle of hatred is born that repeats the pain and takes away the ability to understand each other. That gives the conclusion that humans can't achieve peace unless forced to. The tragic, cold conviction in his words hung heavy in the air, a final, heartbreaking echo of the idealistic child Jiraiya had once known. Nagato, Naruto said, his voice dropping to a serious, low register. You've been lied to. He pressed the advantage, laying out the chilling truth. The eyes you have belong to Madara Uchiha, and he's using you to collect the tailed beasts. The moment you seal all 9 tails into the Geto statue, he'll betray you and take control of the 10 tails. Nagato's eyes widened, and Conan and Jiraiya looked at Naruto in shock. How do you know that? Nagato asked, his voice cracking with disbelief. I just do. That doesn't matter right now, Naruto dismissed. I'm not sure what Madara wants, but it's not good. The 10 tails isn't like the other tailed beasts. It's a mindless husk of nature energy, a force that can't be stopped. Even the 9 tails is nothing in comparison to it. What the hell are you saying? Jiraiya demanded, looking frantically between the two young men. He's right, Nagato conceded, the confession tearing at his composure. I felt that too. You did? Naruto questioned. Yeah, I knew. I knew you wouldn't hurt Conan. I knew you two have the Rinnegan, and I knew that I can trust you. But before that, answer me. What is your version of true peace? Naruto's answer came without hesitation, a calm, steady counterpoint to Nagato's despair. My version of peace is the one that comes from within, when two souls can understand each other without needing words. It doesn't have to be lasting. As humans, we can only accomplish so much. He stared at Nagato, mirroring his resolve. My version of peace is to create the next generation to uphold our values and maintain the peace that we built on alliance and mutual respect. A profound shift took place inside Conan. Naruto's words were exactly what Yahiko used to say and what Nagato used to dream of before they lost their way to hatred. Nagato's eye widened, a slow smile spreading across his face. I see. In that case, I'll entrust my legacy to you, he stated, his decision absolute. He then performed a shocking, painful act. He plucked out one of his Rinnegan. I can't do much in my current state, but I'll stop Madara when he comes back for the Rinnegan, he said. Conan's eyes were wide with horror. What? No, you can't do that, she cried out. Ignoring her pleas, Nagato fixed his gaze on Naruto. Naruto, please look after Conan and make sure she stays safe, he said as he raised the extracted Rinnegan toward the young shinobi. The eye began to glow, then cleanly glided into Naruto's hand. You will do that for me, won't you, Naruto? He asked. I will, Naruto replied, his voice firm as he accepted the eye. He then moved to carry out his promise, beginning to take Conan away. No, I won't go. Leave me now. Conan resisted, tears beginning to stream down her face. She looked desperately toward her old master. Jiraiya-sensei, it's wrong. Jiraiya stood silent and conflicted, his face a mask of sorrow. Even if I want to, I can't stop Naruto, he said, his voice barely a whisper. Please go, Nagato urged them, his expression soft. I'm too far gone, but you can live. No, please, I can't lose you too, she pleaded, tears welling in her eyes. You won't, Nagato assured her. I and Yahiko will continue to exist within you. With those final words, Naruto took the resisting Conan away, and Jiraiya followed, leaving Nagato alone in the chamber to face his final confrontation. The world slowly swam back into focus for Conan. A throbbing ache radiated from the back of her skull. She found herself lying in a comfortable bed, the soft blankets feeling alien after years of damp rain. Her hand immediately went to the tight bandages wrapped around her head and covering her left eye. She struggled to sit up, her gaze scanning the unfamiliar room until it landed on the tall figure of Naruto, who was staring out a window, his face distant and unreadable. Calm down, he said, his voice flat, not bothering to turn around. How? She whispered, the question laced with the raw reality of her loss. I know it's hard for you, but what? She interjected, her grief finally tearing through the numbness. He was the only family I had left, and he's alone there. Tears welled in her eyes, threatening to overwhelm her. Naruto finally turned from the window, his Rinnegan fixed on her. His expression was not one of comfort, but of cold, hard challenge. He cared enough to sacrifice himself for you, Naruto stated, his voice ringing with absolute certainty. And now you'll let it be in vain? For your despair? Naruto turned from the window, his expression grim. The casual silence of the room was shattered by the cold truth he had to deliver. Teams 7 and 9 were sent to the hidden mist, he stated, his voice flat. But they ran into him instead, the masked man who claims to be Madara Uchiha. He leveled his gaze at Conan, forcing her to meet his eye. He's the one who caused the infamous Nine-Tails attack on Konoha, he continued. He fought my father on equal terms 14 years ago, and right now he took Guy and his Team 9 down in less than 5 minutes. Only Itachi could fight him, and even he couldn't defeat him. We even have a casualty, Isamu Uchiha. Conan looked away, absorbing the weight of the names and the loss. I just don't know what to do, she confessed, her voice thick with despair. He came to us a long time ago, claimed that Nagato was the reincarnation of the Sage of Six Paths, and then he manipulated Nagato to turn the Akatsuki into a terrorist organization. She finally looked back at Naruto, a terrible final truth in her eyes. You know Nagato will die if he fought Madara. Madara was the one who trained Nagato in the first place. Naruto walked up to her and placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. It's okay. I'll give you time, he said softly. He gave her one last meaningful look and then exited the room, disappearing in a flawless crow body flicker jutsu. He arrived back at his home moments later and was immediately met by the concerned faces of his family. His mother, Kushina, his siblings, Mito and Minma, and his fiancée, Yuki. Naruto walked past his concerned family and went straight to his room, Yuki following close behind. She closed the door and turned to him, her worry evident in her voice. "Will everything be okay?" she asked simply. He looked at her, the weight of the new Rinnegan and Madara's shadow heavy on his mind. "I don't know," Naruto admitted, the most honest and difficult answer he could give.